We're live now, Chairman.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Planning Committee. I'm the Chairman, Councillor Pauline Hazel. To begin the meeting, there are a few matters of housekeeping that I must let you have. A risk assessment, including COVID-19 risks, has been undertaken for this meeting. Hand sanitizer, wipes and masks are available. Masks should be worn whilst arriving and moving around the meeting room unless you have a medical exemption. Can I remind everybody that seating is socially distanced with 2 meters between each seat. Please do not remove the chairs. Masks can be removed when seated. There are no practice alarms planned for this evening, so if an alarm sounds, please evacuate to the town hall by going down the main staircase or the back staircase to the High Street and then to the car park behind the town hall in St Ronald Street. This meeting is being streamed live over the internet on the Council's YouTube channel and will also be available afterwards. Please would speakers use microphones at all times and speak directly into the microphone, and would participants, both those joining us online and in the moot hall, please mute the microphones when not speaking. Members of the committee will introduce themselves, starting from my right, then the rest of the committee who are sitting opposite.
I'm Councillor Robert Davidson, representing Mersey and Pyfleet Ward.
Councillor Jackie McLean, representing Markstown Lair Ward.
Councillor Roger Mannion, Tiptree Ward.
Councillor Jared Oxford, Highwoods Ward, substituting for Councillor Beverley Oxford.
Councillor Martin Vaughan's, Beerchurch Ward.
Councillor Mike Lilly, Old Heath and the Hive and Roe Hedge Ward.
Councillor Helen Chua, St Anne's and St John's Ward.
Councillor Lynn Barton, Shrub End Ward.
Thank you. In attendance here or via Zoom are planning officers Annabelle Cooper, Eleanor Moss, Lucy Mondon, James Ryan, Irini Demaruki and Simon Cairns. Jan Mooney and Richard Clifford are here for procedural matters. Members of the committee may use electronic devices to access their meeting papers, and visitors are welcome to use mobile phones and other devices, including cameras, but please use them discreetly, set them to silent, and do not use voice or camera flash functions. We may have a break at 8 o'clock, subject to the items remaining. There are toilets on every floor in the building. There is also an induction loop in this room. This is a quasi-judicial committee which makes decisions based on material planning considerations following the laws of the land and the policies of the council. If the committee is minded to refuse an application, members will use such consideration and evidence that will stand up in a court of law. The material planning considerations are listed in the committee's agenda.
They take a few moments. Oh, Pauline Hazel looks like she's been tangoed.
Item number 2 is having a say. If anyone has a petition sent to me on any of the items on the agenda this evening, please do so now.
No one's indicating, Chairman.
Thank you. Item 7.4, land opposite Magpie Chase Stanway. We have the officer Lucy Mondon, a public speaker for Roger Gillies, and no against and no councillors. 7.5, Craffield Road. We have Eleanor Moss, the presenting officer. Public against, Tim Oxford via Zoom, and no public speakers for and no councillors. Item 7.6, Gladstone Road, Cultister. We have presenting officer Eleanor Moss, and there are no public speakers or councillors. 7.7 is the Shrub End Depot. Presenting officer Eleanor Moss, and we have no speakers. 7.8, Maybury Walk, Colchester. Presenting officer Eleanor Moss. Public against, Daniel Krellin. No public speaker for, and councillor Dave Harris is here. 7.9 is the Town Hall. The presenting officer is Erini Demaruku. Sir Bob Russell is here in person, and there are no other speakers. It is possible, therefore, that some of these applications can be considered en bloc. So, Richard, will you say to us which applications we can consider en bloc, please?
Thank you, Chairman. In respect of item 7.4, you have a public speaker for, but no public speaker against, no councillors. The public speaker for has indicated he's content for the item to pass en bloc. So in terms of the items you're looking to pass en bloc, they're items 7.3, 7.4, 7.6 and 7.7. So, Chairman, it is proposed to take those items in line with the officer recommendation and any additional comments on the amendment sheet.
Committee members, do any of you wish to speak on any of these items, or are you happy to go straight to the en bloc voting? Councillor McLean.
I'd like to speak on 7.4, a couple of issues. That's the community centre.
So we are left then with 7.3, 7.6 and 7.7. And they're all recommended for approval, with the exception of the Gladstone Road application, which is a temporary approval. Are you happy to approve this, committee?
Yes, happy, Chairman.
Yes? That's unanimous. So items 7.3, 7.6 and 7.7 are approved. Thank you. Therefore, we will begin this evening with item 7.1, which is land east of Plumbers Road, Fordham. May Annabelle Cooper start us off, please?
Good evening, councillors.
Thank you, Annabelle.
Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So this application has been brought to planning committee because it's a departure from the adopted local plan. The application is an outline application for 17 dwellings on a site that is allocated in the emerging local plan. All matters are reserved apart from the principal and the access. So matters such as appearance, landscaping, layout, and scale would be determined under reserve matters application.
The sound,
Excuse me, Chair.
the sound is very poor.
Yeah, I can't hear a word that she's saying. It's just a muffled.
Chairman, could you just give us a couple of minutes and see what we can do? Thank you.
We'll just take a couple of minutes to hopefully put it right. I do apologise for this, ladies and gentlemen, but this is the first meeting of the Planning Committee to actually happen in person for around 15 months. And it is also, well, we're double-hatted with the internet, so inevitably there are going to be gremlins, but we ask for your patience and we hopefully will correct them very soon. Thank you.
Excuse me, Chair.
Yes, Councillor.
Is there any reason why we're here, why we can't have the planning officers in attendance as well? Because it's a very important part of the planner meeting that the officer's presentation is heard by everybody. So I would like to send her or the officers here with us. But if we're going to do this in the future, it has to be in the right way and not this summer. And also the noise of the traffic is absolutely horrendous as well. So apart from that, I prefer to be at home, I think, on the Teams.
I don't disagree, Councillor Lilly. I didn't know until this evening when I arrived here that there were officers coming to us remotely, but we will discuss that going forward with the officers. Thank you.
I think as it's the first meeting, we can be a bit more tolerant anyway. I think we ought to just bear with everybody, and then we can, going forward,
Chair,
we can see about how we go.
Chair, could I also say, as a trade union member, we have a duty of care towards our staff, and I believe the government advice is where you can work at home, where you can work from home, you should work from home.
Patience is a virtue, I understand. Ladies and gentlemen, while we are waiting for the presenting officer, Annabel Cooper's system to be updated, we will go on to 7.2, which is the junction of Tollgate Road and Church Lane, the mast for 5G. So please may I ask James Ryan to present this to us, please.
Well, good evening, members. Good evening, Chair. We're here to have a look at application 7.2, which is a 18-metre high 5G mast on the junction of Tollgate Road and Church Lane at Stanway. It's a prior notification. It's not a planning application. The development itself is permitted development, but the council have the benefit of assessing the siting and appearance. So we have to determine this tonight either way, or the application would gain deemed consent. Here's a block plan showing general vicinity in Stanway. I've got some better photos than that. It's come out rather poor. I'll just zoom in a bit. Don't worry about that one. That is that's the flank of the dwelling located towards the east, but I've got a slightly better image than that. These haven't come out brilliantly.
Excuse me, James, but I think people a little further away than I am. I mean, I can barely see it. The one before, so it's going to be very difficult for members to actually see those drawings.
What I'll do is I will go into the what I may be able to do is to show you the okay. I don't think I'll get that in the browser version. One second.
We have turned some lights off, so possibly, James, the next slide may be more visible.
This is the PDF that we've been supplied with, so. If you can just about make that, I can probably zoom in. So that shows an existing power cabinet, street light, street sign, some other infrastructure. So that's the previous image I showed you. That's the two street lights, the house that's beyond towards the east, and the hedge along there. Now that's the layout. It's pretty clear on my screen, but I appreciate it's not fantastic there. But if you see my mouse there, that's the location of the mast. The central ring in the middle is the mast itself, and the rectangle is the cabinet that it kind of emerges from. Just zoom out. So that is the mast in situ. And if I can just go back to the sharing the actual presentation. I'll show you the photos. So that's the most zoomed in I could get of the image of the mast. So long and slim tower and transmitters on the top. Here's some photos of the junction where it's proposed to be located. You can see they're drawn on the ground where the mast is going to go here. That first box. You see the width of the footway. There's 3.7 meters of footway width between the proposed mast and the back edge of the footway. That's the facing south. Flats over the other side of the road. More residential dwellings. That's taken Church Lane across the site, showing existing broadband cabinets that are already there. And we would highlight the existing infrastructure around. That's the site from the other side of the road. And then further along the road, you'll see the mast in here. So I'll go back to the image of the mast. And as you see, as previously mentioned, and as you'll see in the report, the only matters that we can consider tonight are the siting and the appearance of the mast. We can't look at the need for it, competition, health issues, or anything like that, because the mast is in itself PD. We can only look at the siting and appearance. We've had a number of representations in favour and a number of representations against. Have the utmost sympathy for the representations against. I think we can all agree it's not a particularly attractive structure. It's utilitarian in design. We have requested that they look at alternative sites further towards Tollgate, as was raised in a number of the objections, but the providers came back and said they weren't able to do that for various reasons. They have to be located in the they have the right to locate them in the highway, so they need to locate them in the highway. They need to locate them in the highway where there's sufficient width to allow pedestrians to pass unencumbered either side, sorry, side by side. And this, as noted, gives 3.7 meters of highway pedestrian clearance. The planning balance, from officers' point of view, tips in favour of the benefits of the provision of 5G. We have had a number of representations that were supporting the scheme on that basis. We've had notes of poor phone reception in the Lakelands area. So some people are happy that there's going to be the rollout of a fifth generation mobile phone and mobile internet technology in the area. But as we said before, it's a balance call. So it's officers consider the scheme to warrant an approval of prior notification. Thanks very much. Any further questions? Happy to take them.
Thank you very much, James. We have two councillors wanting to speak, Councillor Paul Dundas and Councillor Leslie Scott Butell. Richard, do we have either or both online? Which one to come first, please?
Councillor Dundas.
Thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, excellent. Thank you. Thank you to the planning committee members, and thank you for agreeing to the calling for this application and allowing me to speak on it. As the planning application or the planning report says, it is a balanced decision, which has received written submissions of both support and objection from nearby residents. As many submissions point out, good 5G coverage is vital for the long-term future of Stanway and the Lakelands area. With more people working from home, advanced broadband, wired and wireless, is vital. And I'll declare an interest here as a customer myself. I know that there are several poor 4G reception areas around there, and we wouldn't want to see it repeated with 5G. But firstly, I would alert you to the fact that the aerial map in some of the documents is quite out of date. It shows the area before a lot of the buildings or the residential properties were actually built. So the impact is a lot more than might be implied from some of those aerial shots. And it's also very close to the road, so it is quite prominent in appearance. And as you can see from the diagram, it is a lot higher than any other structures existing around there at the moment. And the Lakelands area consists of a fairly large residential zone and a similarly large retail and industrial zone to the north. And my feeling is that the mast would surely be more appropriate in the commercial area, where frankly, amongst the already quite a number of utilitarian buildings, it would probably be almost unnoticeable. On page 10 of the background planning papers provided in the application, it shows a map of sites they have considered. Some they correctly identify as being even worse in terms of proximity to residential properties, but there is one on the Western Bypass much closer to the commercial areas, which is only discounted due to insufficient pavement width. What that implies then, that there's no specific technical reason in terms of coverage why the mast needs to be on the corner of Church Lane, and coverage could be obtained from siting it to the north in the commercial area. All of the sites considered are on pavements adjoining the highway. There doesn't seem to have been any consideration to siting it on private land or even mounting it on existing commercial buildings. Can the committee please inquire why this is the case? Is it down to cost that the company do not want to pay rent or purchase land? Have the local landowners, such as the Tollgate Partnership or British Land, been approached? I don't think people in Stanway are being NIMBYs on this. They want good coverage and they understand that that means mass. What they want to be sure of is that all alternatives, which are a better compromise between technical effectiveness and visual impact, have been considered. In summary, it's clear from the documents the mast could be sited almost 1 kilometre away and still give the adequate coverage. I actually find it quite hard to believe that on the commercial area there isn't one site amongst all that that includes several tall buildings already that wouldn't work. So as a committee, I would ask you to be absolutely sure and question the applicant thoroughly as to why only sites on the public highway are being considered, and be absolutely 100% sure the mast could not be sited in the commercial area before you consider approving this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dundas. And now Councillor Leslie Scott-Buttell.
Thank you very much. Good evening, committee. Members will appreciate the reasons that I've called the application in to be discussed by the planning committee. Stanway Parish Council have objected to the proposal due to strong opposition from residents, and Councillor Dundas has also called this in as there's been a significant local comment. There have also been 20 representations objecting to the proposal, C10.1, with the majority objecting to the location and visual impact. However, I note that there is support for the proposal due to the wishes for better connectivity. The Highways Authority does not object to the proposals as submitted. However, the precise locations of the proposed development should be determined by the Essex Highway Street Care team or even Street Works team, in which case, why is the site being marked up? This is premature. Moving on to 16.3, the proposal is permitted development granted by Part 16 of the General Permitted Development Order 2015 as amended. This means the principle of development cannot be assessed by the council. The need for the mast cannot be taken into consideration. The only matters that can be assessed are the siting and appearance, i.e. where the mast is located and what it looks like. And this is the point that residents have made in their representations. To reiterate, this is permitted development and the only grounds that it can be refused on are the siting and appearance. Moving on to 16.9, in terms of siting, the cabinet and mast are proposed on the edge of the footway along Tollgate Road, close to the junction with Church Lane. It is a relatively prominent site, but avoids being directly adjacent to residential dwellings, etc., etc. 16.10 goes on to say, the applicants have looked at a number of alternative locations and have set out why they have discounted them in their planning statement. The suggestion to move the mast north towards Tollgate commercial area was considered by the applicants. The planning statement sets out a site on Martin Hunt Drive, which is further north, but the site was discounted as this was even nearer to dwellings. The point that I wish to focus on, and I believe is the crux of this application, is that the applicants state that the only viable option has been put forward, and the council do not have evidence to suggest that this is not the case. This is unacceptable. I want to see the evidence that this is the only viable option. I want the applicant to provide the evidence to the council. I want residents to know that every option has been explored to site this in a more residential friendly alternative. I want to know that alternative options have been fully investigated, for example, the nearby retail parks. And I want to see the detailed evidence showing why the various sites work or don't. The only grounds that Colchester Borough Council can refuse on are where the mast is located and what it looks like. The planning committee cannot approve this permitted development until the evidence is provided. Please either refuse as the evidence has not been provided or defer until the evidence is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott-Britell. I will now throw this open to the committee. Who would like to go first? Councillor Chua.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. If I could ask Ryan to go back on the screen, you know where the pavement is and there's a marking of where the mast is going to be. Can you point out how high is that mast going to be with regards to the street lightings that's around there? Because I'm not very sure about the sighting and the appearance that it's going to be. Thank you.
Absolutely. Can I share my screen again?
Please do, yes.
Oh, where are we? So these are the street lights.
Yeah, excuse me, the one, you know, the pavement where you have got the drawing, the marking in the white, where it's going to be sited. And there are some street lights there. I just want to know how high is that in comparison to the street lights? Must going to be well above the street, sorry, much higher than what's on there?
Oh, it's significant, yes.
Twice the height.
So that light that I took the photo by was that height. It's almost twice the size. It was probably greater than twice the size. That's 7.5 meters, and this is an 18-meter mast, so significantly taller.
Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, James. Two things, if I may. Do you know what distance the proposed location is from that property that was shown in the photograph? And the second one is, quite often when we've had previous applications for masts, they've provided overlay maps for the reasons why the location serves best. Did they provide that information for committee to consider? Thank you.
I appreciate it's not the clearest on the projector, but if you see that dimension there is 3.7 meters, which is the level, the amount of additional footway that's still left. So the other house, there's quite a large piece of land, this is ONH land here, and the dwelling is further. So I don't have an actual dimension, but it's.
Well, if I may, obviously the photograph or the mock-up you showed doesn't show the distance.
No.
Where the property is in distance.
But I can show you.
It's quite a considerable distance away.
It is a considerable. If you can see from that photo, or maybe I did take one. It's set quite. That's the property there, and it's set quite a long way. I wouldn't want to quote a distance, not knowing the specific distance, but it's significant.
Because in the original one, it looked quite close. So
absolutely, yeah. I mean that's purely because they've drawn an elevation with the dwelling behind for context, but it's not. It's a relatively spacious, and in many respects that's to its detriment. It makes it more prominent because it's not directly by dwellings. The other sites, so they say, were closer to dwellings, and that makes it even less appealing, I would imagine, for the respective residents. We have a detailed planning statement provided, but they haven't given, and they have shown us the indicative locations of other sites that would potentially work, as Councillor Dundas mentioned. But in many respects, we simply have to take what they're saying on face value. I did request at least looking at the option of moving the mast further north, but they declined and they would like this application determined as it is. Unfortunately, deferring is not an option because it would gain deemed consent anyway. So that means it would be approved automatically. So if members are uncomfortable with the siting or appearance, they will need to refuse tonight. With regards to the question that Councillor Dundas raised in terms of the have they approached British Land or ONH or the tollgate partnerships? I don't know, to be perfectly honest, but they are. I don't think so because they are installing these on highway land. So that is where they put them. They are not looking at private land. They have an arrangement with the Highway Authority, and I think Councillor Scott Butell mentioned that the Highway Authority said they will look at the precise micro siting. It will be where those boxes are, but the street team who maintain the public highway, which this footway is a piece of, will work out the absolute exact precise location, but it needs to be where it says on the plans, basically. So as far as I'm aware, they're not looking at private land or buildings for antennas of this nature. But no, I don't have any actual science from a coverage point of view, and you're right, we did used to get that with 4G. We haven't in this location, so we just have to take it on face value that this is where from their point of view, this is their optimum site. This is the only place they're prepared to deliver it, and they would like it determined on that basis.
Do we know the greensward that is behind that proposed site? Do we know if that's earmarked for housing, or is that going to be greensward forever?
I contacted ONH, who are the owners of that land. We did a land registry search, and it is still owned by ONH, and they didn't have any comments to make. So they didn't say, no, we intend to develop that. So we have to determine this application on the basis of the situation as is now. And that is I'm not sure, I mean, it's sort of vacant land, really. It's privately owned vacant land.
It's Councillor Dundas and Councillor Scott Butell made very reasonable comments and points they raised, and I am a little confused now that it would appear that we can do something about its appearance and also the site. So if it's permitted development, are we able to say, well, we can't say if it's permitted development, they can do it, but if we have a right to question where it is, then do we not have a right to ask those questions of the developer for specific answers, such as Councillor Scott Butell and Paul Dundas raised, and therefore make a decision based on what they come back and tell us?
Yeah, I mean, I've tried to open a conversation with them in terms of their alternative sites. And I tried to at least get a conversation moving in terms of why it can't be nearer the tollgate centre, for example, which I think everyone agrees has got a more commercial feeling, certainly. But they were not inclined to enter into those conversations with me, and have said they are not willing to withdraw the application. They would like it determined as it is. So what they are effectively saying is, if you do not consider the siting and design to be acceptable, you have the right to refuse it, and they will either have the right to appeal the decision or to not install the cabinet, and that will be down to their commercial standpoint.
Councillor Davidson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Mr. Ryan, just on that appeal or not, we had a site in Fingringhoe which Anglian Water were trying to put a new mast on. It was turned down by Cultister Borough Council, and they lost it on appeal because they hadn't done due diligence and looked at alternative sites. So I don't see why, without showing us the alternative sites they have actually looked at, why we cannot accept that that is the only site available. So I just wonder, and I have other comments, but that's relevant to what you were saying.
I mean, they have shown alternative sites in the supporting documentation, but they have discounted them primarily for the reason of there not being significant enough because they are not putting these on private land, they're putting them in the highway. So they do want to retain significant plot width, so they do not obstruct pedestrian movement, particularly pedestrians, people with buggies, that kind of thing. And so the other sites were either discounted because they were even nearer right up next against residential dwellings, or they were where there's the not significant plot width and it would have caused an obstruction in the highway. They didn't go quite as far north as the Tollgate Partnerships building, the kind of the C-shaped building and the British Land building up there as well, because they say that would not have met their coverage needs. So they have, I don't want to mislead members, say they haven't provided alternative sites. They have done their site selection as they are required to do, but they have discounted those primarily because of plot width, and they would need to be even nearer residential. As you can see from this, although it is a residential area, there are good distances from houses, as opposed to other areas where there's a greater plot width, but they put them right next to a house, which would be unpalatable for the resident, I'd imagine.
You have no further comments on that? Okay. Councillor Lilly.
Thank you. Over in the dark over here, this side. This won't be the first application we have now, because of the way that the government has changed permit development for these masts to come and sit. We'll have no say whatsoever. And you heard tonight, we haven't really got a say in this one either. It's such a shame, because people hate these things that they put in, and there's huge height to it as well. And I understand that in the new proposals, there is no maximum height being put forward either. So we could have double, they'd be like pylons. And William Rowage objected to the one thing as well, because it wasn't suitable there. But I think things have changed to move on. So all we've got on this is the sighting or the appearance. Some areas or some poles have been camouflaged in the past to look at, to blend in. I don't know if we can do it with this one, but I think that the way that we're going, the only way we can stop this and others is to actually refuse the application on the grounds that the siting is not, it's not right, and it should be placed somewhere else. So I'm happy to propose that we reject this application or this permitted development, whatever it is, and that's the only reason we got, because I don't think they are going to change their minds over it. So if somebody wants to second that.
Yeah. Do we have a seconder?
I'm happy to go for it.
Yeah, Councillor McLean. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Chairman. No one can say this is attractive by any means, but as you say, it's permitted development. So from that point of view, there's not a lot we can do. And Lakelands obviously want 5G. So it's a delicate balance, really. And I don't quite know how we go forward. But I was led to believe that the siting was the place to get the least interference. And that's why that was chosen. That's what we were told yesterday. In which case, if other areas can't be explored because they've already been eliminated, we're in quite a difficult position, particularly, as I say, as it's permitted development. So I'm not sure I do agree that we can reject it, quite honestly. Thank you.
Councillor McLean.
I understand where everybody's coming from, and I know we need the 5G, but I cannot understand why it's actually on a pavement, which is a straight through run. Why could it not be moved over nearer the road? Why did the pedestrians have to give up their walkway for a box and deviate off the right line? There's a lot of young children use this pathway up and down, and of course with the building that's there, there's thousands of people on the site now. So I'm just wondering, could be moved over nearer the road, that's not going to impinge so much on the public with the pathway. It's actually on the pathway going down. No, it's actually on the pathway. That's what you said, wasn't it, Ryan?
The masts are going where you can see those white. Yeah, it will be, the green, the grassland is private land. This here is adopted highway. So why they are putting it, well, they've specifically chosen it is because it's wide and allows 3.7 meters of clearance still. And because obviously it will block this piece. And there is other, as you can see, there is other highway infrastructure already in the highway. So they've selected here, and highways are happy with that.
Councillor Mannion.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're also missing a fundamental issue here. Has there any been cognizance from, who is it, Orange or 3 or Hutchinson? Have they actually given any information about the risks of spectrum, the transmit spectrum? 4G transmits at something like 30 to 60 kilowatts, that mast, at a frequency of 28 gigs to 39 gigs. Now that is actually up to the radar frequencies, and radar frequencies are dangerous. Now, I understand that there is distance from the houses, but there isn't a great deal of distance between 6 and 8 Church Lane and the site of the mast. Has there been any thought, and has there been any talk or offer of any information from Hutchinson about that risk? Thank you.
Yeah, they are obliged to self-certificate that it is safe. And as a permitted development structure, we are not allowed to take that into consideration. We are only allowed to look at the siting and design. There are other potential sites, so they say, would be even nearer to residential property. So this one is more spacious in that respect. And obviously they have to be close to the location which they will serve. So, but if they certify that they are compliant with the regulations, we have to accept that, and the NPPF is clear on that basis.
So basically, you're taking it for granted that they are compliant. There hasn't been any checks or anything else, or any evidence that has been supplied as part of the application, which I think they should do.
No, that's not quite right. They have certified. They've provided a certificate that they will comply with the regulations as part of the application, and we have to take that at face value because we are told to.
Councillor Oxford, please.
Yeah, it's not something that any of us like, but we do need connectivity. And I've got 3 about to come forward in my ward, and some of them are on pavements that are only 2 metres wide. So they're going to take a significant percentage of that should they be approved on siting and design. I think the issue we've got is our hands are tied to the point is that it's purely the siting, purely the design, and if the applicant, this is my reading, I'm sit here to be told otherwise, but my reading of it is that provided they're prepared to sign off on all the relevant parts, we then can't doubt the fact that that is their preferred location for the best spread. Therefore, it limits us almost to a point where permitted development for masts should just be, we have no say, because we virtually don't have a say.
Thank you. Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the elephant in the room is permitted development. And it's because we are progressively being emasculated. And so therefore, there's lots of things I could say, but what I'd like a bit more detail on, because of the emasculation due to the permitted development rights, which is a governmental diktat. Could you tell us more about the actual design and how it could not be camouflaged? Because what's apparent to me is that the surrounding area is residential, and the utility structures are street lamps. There are no telegraph poles, so it would be difficult to camouflage it as a kind of overlarge telegraph pole, which I have seen elsewhere. And it is true that when you drive down the road, they do look like a rather large telegraph pole within your rear view mirror, but that won't be the case here. So I'd be more interested to know how they are going to camouflage it, and if they're not, is that justifiable?
It's a very good question. If I can show, I'm stopped sharing, hold on, I'll share it. In short, it isn't camouflaged. Their mitigation is to make it as slimline as possible. So it's a very slimline pole, and it's slightly wider at the top where the transmitters, which are here, can be seen. When asked, they said the only other option we have for 5G, because they're much heavier than 4G transmitters, is an open headframe style mast, and they are a small to medium latticework tower with a triangular headframe at the top. And they are far more dominant. So that's one of their options, but obviously we don't want one of those because they really are very obtrusive. So their mitigation is to provide this type, which is it's not a pastiche. I mean, 4G, there were some 4G towers that looked a bit like trees and they looked generally terrible. There were the smaller towers that were large telegraph poles, as you mentioned, and they were sometimes used, but I have asked, and that is not up for the taking, unfortunately, on one of these. So their mitigation is we are doing a slim line tower as opposed to a large latticework tower. Okay. But you're not going to mistake this for anything else. It will look like a mast.
Okay, so in your professional opinion, do you think that lack of camouflage is actually justifiable?
In my professional opinion, I think that these things are very unattractive. However, they do tend, unbelievably, to blend into the urban/suburban scene, and there are quite a few of them about, and the eye just gets used to them. There is a similar-ish one at the Hythe roundabout near the Tesco's, which was approved via the same method, and it is bigger than a couple of the other masts that it sits next to, but it's not visually jarring, I would suggest, but every time I go past it, I look at it, because it is large, but it's a really balanced call. It's a really balanced call. There are significant communication benefits to these things, but they are not pretty.
Thank you, Chair. I'm finished.
From my point of view, I'm really concerned about the greensward that is immediately behind that, because it would appear that we do not know whether that's going to be built on. And we all know developers, if there's a 2-inch piece of land, somebody wants to put a house on it. So I would not be at all surprised within a few weeks or months, we get a planning application to build houses on that site, which would bring them in very close proximity to that tower. I understand the height of it does allow the beams or whatever to go over the heads of houses, but I am a bit concerned. I do feel there's some arrogance on the part of the applicant, because I would like to see them to have come here to the committee to explain themselves. I think we have extremely legitimate concerns, and I don't believe it's for them to just dismiss. We are not going to do anything. We're not going to give you anything. This is what we say. And therefore, on those grounds, the proximity of that greensward and what's going to happen to it, and also the fact that this committee ought to be able to have the developers here to give us that information. Do any other members have anything else to add, or would you like to go to Councillor Warnes and then Councillor David?
Thank you, Chair. I think there's a danger here that we doth protest too much. At the end of the day, they are only exercising what they're legally allowed to do, and they're using the permitted development rights, which is taking authority away from us to be able to impose the type of things that all of us would perhaps like to. So I think I think what's being put over is there has to be an actual recognition that if we don't make a decision tonight, it will be deemed planning permission under the permitted development rights. And that's something we could possibly lobby government about or lobby our actual member of parliament about. But in terms of this particular decision in front of us, it is the permitted development rights which appears to be hamstringing us in the depth of the decision that we might otherwise like to make.
Councillor Oxford, please.
Thank you, James. I forgot to ask, is there a specific colour they would have those 3 boxes? Because obviously a lot of the telecommunication ones are dark green, aren't they, or whatever? And also the other thing is, do you think that because the pavement there is particularly wide at 3.8 metres, it would hamstring us if we were to use it as grounds for refusal?
Yeah, I think it will all be a kind of whitish grey. That's just an illustrative drawing. They are not going to have a green. The antennas are not going to be a different colour to the mast. Will all be a kind of whitish grey. Will be colour the same throughout. Yes, I do think that they have left significant pavement width here, and to frame a refusal on that basis would be very difficult to sustain at appeal.
Thank you. I personally don't have a real issue with the look of them. They are what they are, and I do agree they probably do fade into the background, but I still maintain I'm very concerned about the siting, and the fact that we have the right to make some decision as to where it's sited. We ought to be able to defer, or if we refuse, we ought to be able to have that company come to the committee and give us the information that the ward councillors in particular are asking for. So advice on that, please. I don't know if Simon Cairns could say, or or
Chairman, Simon Cairns has indicated he'd like to speak, so we're just going to bring in.
Yes, Simon Cairns is going to address us, so please, little patience. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Are you happy if I just do this remotely? In terms of the matters before you, I think as James has repeatedly put across, this is really about siting and design only. And I think we have to accept the government's attitude towards 5G is that it is a public benefit, and it is something which is given a lot of support in the MPPF. I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me at the moment, or maybe I do. Yeah, paragraphs 112 to 113, there is a very permissive encouragement given to committees on this point, on the public benefits of the 5G network and its economic importance to communities. In terms of the siting and design, I think as James has put across, this is a generic design which is rolled out nationally. It is the most minimal design of all of these masts. The other alternative is really quite hideous in my own opinion, but there we are. In terms of, there was another case which was referred to at Fingering Hoe, which was refused and dismissed, but it was quite a different context, Chairman. It was an extremely rural setting with some rather important trees which would have been adversely affected by the installation. So there were very sound reasons for refusal. I think in this instance, it is very difficult to identify specific harm that would flow from an installation in this location. As you've heard, this is the preferential location in terms of distancing from dwelling houses, and therefore the alternatives are not going to give you that advantage in terms of the concerns that members have expressed around radiation emissions from the tower. In terms of the reason for refusal, which I think Councillor Oxford questioned, the footway that remains is more than adequate to allow the passage of pedestrians, which is quite different from some of the other locations which we have considered. So in terms of a reason for refusal, have you heard? The Highway Authority have not objected, and I don't think we have a reason for refusal around pedestrian obstruction or safety for pedestrians, because the remaining footway would be adequate for pedestrians. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davidson.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wonder if I could make a couple of suggestions, really. And the first of all, Mr. Ryan, when we see the picture of the 3.7 metre pavement, there's a traffic sign right in the middle of that. That needs to be moved, because if you're disabled or partially sighted, you will not see that. Secondly, they're all paviors, and actually you try putting a wheelchair or a pram or anything else over that rough surface. That is not the same as the footpath that they're actually building on. So I think either the highways or they need to reinstate an appropriate footpath, a smooth one that all people could use. So that's the first thing. The second one is regarding the height, and we're not sure about the colour, but I just wondered, with that massive 18 metres, whether in fact the first 9 metres or so is a darkish colour, like a telegraph pole, but then the top 9 metres actually could be sky coloured, light blue or dark grey, something like that, so it actually doesn't look like one massive structure. It wouldn't cost them much more, and it would break up the height, perhaps. Just a comment.
In terms of effectively the off-site works to the pavement around, that would have to come down to the Highway Authority, as that is highway land. If they felt that they needed to rejig the road signage or the pavers, they could potentially do that, but we couldn't condition that to happen on this prior notification. And the painting it sort of half and half colour so it fades into the sky, again, it's not something that we would be able to condition. If that was something that was vital to you, it's a matter of refusal, I think.
Is that not appearance, though? Are we not allowed to choose appearance as a reason?
Yes, we can either approve or refuse it as a prior notification. So, and that is certainly appearance, absolutely. But we've been asked to determine the application as it is, and it is a standard off-white greyish mast, and that's how they come. So if we were to refuse, but we considered a painted variant to be possible, you could refuse, and we could suggest that you would maybe be more mindful to approve such a structure, and then it would be for the applicants to set out exactly how that's going to work from a technical point of view, and that would be something that would have to come back as a further application. But we can't defer this one. We have to make a decision on this one.
Chairman, so if we can't condition the appearance, we can condition the sighting, and the sighting could be on the paviors nearer the public sign. So that would give a straight run through of the footpath without interference.
Unfortunately, we can't condition a different. They put this application in front of us, and it's for us to either approve it or to refuse it for reasons, for specific reasons. What we can't say is, I mean, what we could do is we could refuse, and we could suggest where we would prefer to see it as an informative, or we could prefer it to look like. But we can't require that this is moved from a different position. With the only way to achieve that would be to refuse this application and then to tell them that we would be happy with it moved. But obviously, I would really want to consult the Highway Authority to make sure they're happy having it moved towards the highway, because that may have highway visibility implications. They like to keep junctions as clear as possible from large structures, because they can, I mean, that would sit within the visibility as you pass in one's car around, as you take first left coming down the Tollgate Road, for example. So that would certainly need a new application, and I'm not sure the highways would accept that. They generally like these things set as far away from the road as possible to prevent visual obstruction to motorists.
Thank you. Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. I would personally rather see it set back on the grass. And there might be an argument for saying that they need to purchase a piece of land in order to do it. But I come back to my central point. I think our hands are tied and we have very little room for actual manoeuvre. And also, on a point of order, Chair, there has been a motion that's been proposed and seconded.
Sorry, we do have on the table a proposal to refuse and seconded, but no one has put forward yet to put a proposal forward to approve. Is there a councillor who will do that?
I will.
So Councillor Oxford is asking that we approve this. Do we have a seconder? And Councillor Barton will second. So are you ready to go to the vote now, members? Yes?
Chair, could I just clarify? We've had a motion to refuse that was tabled by Councillor Lilly and seconded. So you'll need to take that first. Yes. Yeah.
So, councillors, we take the proposal to refuse first. May all those in favour raise your hands.
Could I ask for the material planning reasons for refusal so we can be clear?
Yes, Councillor Lilly.
I think that there are no material planning on this one because it's a predetermined application. So all we can do is refuse, and the reasons for refusal is that on appearance and location, and that's all we can do, I'm afraid.
Chair, on a point of clarification, can I ask at what point we might need to consider the drop procedure and whether that is relevant in this case?
I'm not sure the drop procedure is relevant in this case. Am I correct, Mr. Ryan?
That's absolutely correct. We would need to determine this tonight either way, or it will become deemed consent as of next week. So if it's a refusal on citing and appearance grounds.
So we have a proposal to refuse on the grounds of appearance and location. All those in favour, please raise your hand.
That's 6 to refuse, Chair.
So that's carried, I think.
Chair, do you just want to take the votes the other way as well?
And now the vote to approve, please.
No, Chairman, sorry, I meant you've taken a vote.
Councillors, and all those against this proposal, please raise your hands. Do we have any abstentions?
That's 3.
So that is carried, isn't it? We have no need then to go to the proposal to approve. So thank you, committee. It's been a rather long decision, but I think we gave it a good airing and I think that was necessary. Thank you.
Chair, could I ask a point of clarification again, please? Now the committee has actually refused this, I take it the decision is subject to appeal. And if the council was to lose that appeal, would we then be liable for costs?
I think, personally, we cannot always be at the mercy of the fear of costs. I think if the committee is genuinely definite in its reasons for refusal and give good reasons why, then we ought not to be awarded costs against us. They are not automatic. And if they go to appeal and an independent inspector votes with them, it doesn't mean that that inspector will actually charge us costs if we are reasonable. I just hope that perhaps the developers in this case will come to the committee and just be a bit more cooperative, really. But I think we were serious in our deliberations and I trust the inspector will understand that. Thank you.
Chair, Mr. Cairns is indicating that you'd like to
Okay, thank you. Mr. Cairns.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering, with regards to the potential for an appeal, it would be very helpful to have some member commentary around which elements of the siting and design you find unacceptable and the reasons why the siting and design is inappropriate. That would obviously assist officers in defending any potential appeal and also in advising the developer how they may remedy their application so that members may find it more palatable. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Am I correct, Councillor Lilly, that we are not happy with its location because of its proximity to houses? And again, the point I made about whether or not the land immediately behind it is open to development. And also that we would wish to have evidence from the developer on the points that Councillor Scott Butell and Councillor Dundas made to actually prove and show why this, in their opinion, is the only site.
Yes, Chair, I think that if they'd come here tonight with evidence to say that they've looked at every other location and this is the best one that they've got and showed us the evidence that they've looked at, then that would be a different story. But they haven't done that. They've insisted this is the best location for their coverage, right next to their house. And as for appearance, it's a really massive, tall aerial telescope, whatever it is. And the appearance to revert tonight, the members of the public up in Stanway, it looks really bad. And I think that we need to clamp down on some of these and have some say on these permitted developments. I know it's a way of going forward, but we're going to be looking at these applications for the next couple of years, and they're going to come up everywhere. And unless we make some sort of stance or put a foot down and say that we must have all the details available to us, so we must have evidence that they've looked at other locations, and they'll get. But if they haven't, then this is not the best location that we could judge by tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Mr. Cairns, is that sufficient? Oh, sorry.
Chairman, I'd like to add to that. The site completely obstructs the smooth footpath that those visually impaired people and children would need to use.
Mr. Cairns, is that information sufficient for you?
That's very helpful, Chair. Thank you. I'm sure we can put those reasons together in a cogent statement to support the refusal. So thank you, members, for those very helpful points.
Thank you, members. We can now move on to, well, go back to item 7.1. If yes, it looks as though we have Annabelle Cooper with us. Annabelle, would you
just
like
confirm you can hear me clearly?
Yes.
Yes, brilliant. Right, I'll share my screen again. Can everyone hear me and see the presentation?
Yes.
Brilliant.
We haven't got the
Excellent.
presentation yet, but we can hear you.
Can you see the presentation now?
Apparently so, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, okay, brilliant. Apologies for earlier. So the item in front of us is brought to Planning Committee because it is a departure from the adopted local plan. The application is for 17 dwellings on a site that is allocated in the emerging local plan. All matters are reserved apart from principal and access. Matters of appearance, landscaping, layout and scale will be determined at a reserved matter stage if this is approved. Here is a location plan. The red line is where the site is and the blue indicates where the applicant owns. The application sits along Plumbers Road. Opposite the site, there is existing residential development. To the south, there is an existing development here, which is affordable housing. There is also a small slither of the red line that goes here, which connects it to the existing affordable housing. I'll explain more about that later. For those of you that are not familiar with the site, I'm going to play a quick video which shows you the view of Plumbers Lane and the application site. I'm just going to flick through a couple of photos which just shows you the context. So this is the road. This behind the hedge is where the site is. It's just showing some of the residential development that's already there. And this is the site itself, and we're looking towards the south, and this is where the affordable housing scheme exists there. This is an illustrative plan. The landscaping and layout and appearance are to be determined at reserve matters, but this is just to demonstrate that they can sufficiently fit the proposed 17 dwellings on the site. So a key aspect of this application is the principle. I'm sure you're all familiar, but for those that aren't aware in the public, Section 1 of the Emerging Local Plan has been adopted, and Section 2 was examined back in April, and we're currently waiting for the planning inspector's response. Therefore, that the plan is at an advanced stage. The most pertinent policies within the emerging plan for this are the spatial strategy SG1 and the specific site, which is SS6. These are very consistent with the National Planning Policy Framework, and therefore these can be afforded considerable weight. When the emerging allocation was put forward, there were only 8 representations received, and 5 of these were objections. It's considered that the application addresses all of these matters, or they could be addressed sufficiently at reserve matter stage. Therefore, the proposed is considered to comply with policy SS6 of the emerging local plan, and the principle is supported. The other matter of determination of this application is the access. As you can see, there are 2 access points proposed here along Plumbers Road. These have been cited specifically to try and avoid direct conflict with the residencies that are along the road already. The Highways Authority have raised no objections and have recommended 15 planning conditions to ensure that the accesses are safe for highway safety and are acceptable in planning terms as well. There's also a footpath that is proposed to run along Plumbers Road. Plumbers Road currently has no pedestrian footpath at all, so this is a big benefit of the scheme. There's also a legal agreement in place with the owners of the land at this parcel, so there'll be a connecting footpath between the proposed development and the existing residential development, helping lead pedestrians to the south, which is where the heart of the village is in Fordham. There has been a trial trenching archaeological excavation undertaken at the site, and this has found that there is no further archaeological works that need to be undertaken at the site. As discussed, landscaping would be a matter that would be discussed at reserve matter stage. It would result in the loss of the hedge that you saw previously in the photographs, but as you can see, they're proposing to replant a hedge behind the visibility sleighs. It also demonstrates that although this is not the layout that would be approved at reserve matters, it is demonstrated that it does not adversely affect the existing neighbouring residential amenities in the area. There's also been a heritage assessment submitted, which confirms that there'll be no impact to the listed buildings that are around the area. Within the committee report, you will have seen that I also cover aspects such as trees, contaminated land, sustainable drainage, and there are no concerns on this as well. And there is also a heads of terms agreed for securing planning obligations, which includes 30% of affordable homes, a RAMS contributions for communities and parks and recreation. As such, it's considered acceptable, and the recommendation is as of approval, subject to the recommended conditions in the committee report and a Section 106 agreement of the planning obligations that have been agreed. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. May I ask Stephen Foster to address the committee, please? You will have 3 minutes, and a bell or indication will come after 2 minutes. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chair and members, for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm speaking on behalf of some of the residents who have made comments. They're summarised in Section 10 of the report. Fordham Parish Council has already submitted an objection, but I'm not speaking on their behalf. I'm not authorised to do so. The planning officer indicates that the comments made by local residents are not substantial, and yet if you look at the list in Section 10, over half of them are completely irrelevant to some of the matters that she has addressed in her very full report. We unfortunately think this is an ill thought out scheme. It's poorly researched, and it's got very poor detail, and I do get that this is for outline consent. It's very difficult to make judgments when you have no measurements, no elevations, and the officer has ignored the northern end of the site where there is potential for very significant overlooking on a property that has been squeezed in onto plot 1. We think there are archaeological issues here, highways issues, and amenities issues. Going first of all to some of the points that the planning officer has raised, you've noticed, I think, in the application, Fordham is not a sustainable settlement. This is outside of SD1. It's not a site for development. This proposal is not in the settlement boundary, and it's a greenfield site. And this is not a field that has been lying unused for many years. This is a working farm. 2 cuts of grass for hay are taken during the year, and the back of the field is used for horses in the adjoining stables. So this is very much part of a working farm. And the council itself has submitted recently, January 2021, a specific report on the traffic problems that this village faces. It's a cut through to the A12 for HGVs and commuter traffic. We have significant concerns that additional traffic from this site will create problems. We noticed that the pavement which is proposed, again, it's very well catered for at the end of the southern end. At the northern end, it will literally stop at a boundary and people have to step in the road. So we think it's ill thought out. On the archaeological side, the report of the trial trench stated that there were Bronze Age and 12th to 14th century pottery, as well as early ditches and a pit. The 10 trenches that were dug missed almost all the potential archaeological pieces there, which are believed to exist by both the Cultister Archaeological Group and Fordham Local History Group. So we believe there may well be some items there which have been missed by those trenches. I respect that you have government targets and you have local targets to meet for housing, but 17 houses, give me 10 seconds, please. 17 houses is not going to get you to that target, and 150 have just been approved in 8 Ash Green, about a mile.
Thank you very much, Mr. Foster. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, is Charlotte Powell here to talk to us, please? Thank you, and again, you have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Evening, councillors. Welcome back. As you are aware from Annabelle's report and your work with the policy team, the application site is allocated in the emerging local plan for up to 20 dwellings. The landowner submitted the parcel of land through the call for sites process a number of years ago, and it was subsequently assessed by the policy team. Fordham was identified as a sustainable settlement with a school, pub, village hall and open space. The application site was selected and allocated by the policy team. The emerging local plan is in its final stages with the most recent examination last month and adoption expected soon. The Fordham policy has had its modifications last month, but these changes will not impact this outline application, only any considerations at reserve matters should permission be granted. The allocation was consulted on in accordance with the policies during the various stages of the local plan and again throughout the life cycle of the planning application. As requested by the case officer, archaeological trial trenching was completed in November 2020 and the trenches were opened and no mitigation was required, which was confirmed by the archaeological officer. The site has road frontage to Plumbers Road and the 2 access points have been discussed and agreed with the Highway Authority. Additionally, we have worked with Annabelle to provide a new public right-of-way to the south of the site through the Hastow scheme and to provide a public footpath down the side of Plumbers Road. This will allow increased connections through and into the village. These measures will aid sustainable travel and integrate the new development into the village. The size and tenures of the 5 affordable homes is based on the SHMA and have been agreed with the housing team. Our indicative market housing mix is and will be based on the most up-to-date data for the borough and discussions with the housing officer to ensure the dwellings are a mix of sizes and provide homes that are needed, allowing 17 new families to join and contribute the vitality of the village. This outline application does not consider design or layout, which, should permission be granted, be fully considered at reserved matters stage. It is hoped that the work on the reserved matters application could commence soon, allowing the dwellings to be delivered and occupied by 2023. This application is for a small-scale housing development in a sustainable village. The local plan is due for adoption soon, and further design details would be discussed with any reserved matters application. A legal agreement will secure obligations, RAMS payments, and the affordable housing. I hope you are minded to agree with the officer and the recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand we now have a statement to be read out from Councillor Chapman.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So Councillor Chapman says, I would like to offer the committee a little background to this application. I have been a councillor for Fordham for nearly 20 years, and one of the longest-standing issues that both the county councillor and I have regularly been challenged on is that of road safety for pedestrians along Plumbers Road. A development some years ago had included a landscape path along some of it, but following much discussion with the Highway Authority, it was clear that there was nothing they could offer to improve the situation along the remaining stretch of the road. A desire by the Village Hall Committee to improve facilities was also apparent. So, following the call for sites for the new borough plan a few years ago, the Parish Council, County Councillor Anne Brown and myself met with the Borough Council's planners to see if a scheme could be developed to improve the footway and provide some Section 106 money to support the Village Hall. The present application is the result. Road safety is one of the major issues in most villages, and I have always worked to find ways and means to improve it. As councillors on this committee will appreciate, that isn't easy. So an opportunity such as this prospective development will always be welcomed by me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. May I open this to the committee? Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, Chair. We obviously had a look at this in the briefing yesterday, and I rang Karen Syrett this morning to ask about the footpath element, and I was mulling over comments made by, I believe, yourself and Jackie yesterday regarding the speed of traffic down that road. And I thought to myself, rather than pull out a historic hedge, why not put the footpath inside the hedge? There'll be less pollution for pedestrians walking there. The hedge is staying there, which is part of the climate emergency. You know, no need to pull it out if you don't need to. Safer for pedestrians, away from speeding, not necessarily speeding traffic, but certainly fast traffic. So I just wondered whether that was a possibility rather than pulling something out and then just moving it back. It seems more sensible to just make the two openings with the correct vision displays, but to put the pavement on the inside, running the length of the development, was my thought. Other than that, I listened to what Nigel has said as ward councillor, and he has an immense amount of knowledge of that area, and I concur with what he said. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Any other comments? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Chair. It's a very valid point that Councillor Oxford's made. I just wondered about cars pulling out with a long nose, and as Gerald said, or Councillor Oxford said, we would need some good site displays to actually pull out, because it is a country road, it is abused, but there again, as long as there's signage to say there is concealed entrance or there are entrances, you know, if we can rely on highways to do something, then I think, you know, that would be very acceptable, and I think it would take away all the upkeep internally on the premises, which I think is very hard to do for some of these. If it's a shared complex, it may never be kept quite as we want it. So, you know, I would be happy to go with that.
Thank you. Any other councillors? Councillor Mannion.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm just a little bit concerned of the amount of houses and everything else on this development, but there are no infrastructure in terms of shopping or anything else in the village at the moment. And also looking at the schools, it looks like the schools will be oversubscribed at the moment. And with additional dwellings, it will only get worse. So I'm not sure that there is sufficient infrastructure to support these properties. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Lilly.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question about the archaeological assessments. I heard tonight from the member of the public who spoke, who said that the trenches were not put in the right place and that they should have been assessed elsewhere. Was the whole site assessed, or was it just the one trench that we saw the photos of in there? And how did they pick that spot and maybe not use local knowledge to put it in somewhere else, in case there is something in the ground there?
Perhaps I could go back to Annabelle and ask if she could answer the questions put by Councillor Oxford in regard to the footpath siting and also the archaeology and the lack of infrastructure.
Yes, I'll go in order. So with regards to the hedging and the footpath, it is an indicative plan at the moment, and it would be resolved fully at reserve matters. As I understand it, to achieve the sufficient visibility displays, the hedging would need to be removed. However, as it needs to be something that could be resolved at reserve matters, as landscaping is part of that, we could look at it putting an informative to try and retain as much of that hedging as possible, if it is possible. Hopefully you'll have seen from the plan that I showed you, though indicative, they were planning to propose a lot of hedge planting, which would be enhanced by trees as well. I did talk to the landscaping officer about this before the evening, and he still has no objection to what they are showing in the indicative plan at the moment. And he also made a comment that it is not an important hedge under the Hedge Act, Hedge Protection Act. With regards to the access, so they did provide a technical assessment with the application, and it's been fully assessed by the Highways Authority, who are the expert in this matter. 15 planning conditions have been proposed, which will control the access, including condition 21, which is very specific with regards to what is an acceptable visibility display. So that would ensure that it is safe for the two accesses that are proposed. With regards to being sustainable, it is considered to be a sustainable settlement. It's allocated for up to 20 dwellings in the emerging local plan. This has come forward for 17 dwellings. The site does have, Fordham does have a primary school, village hall and fields, and a pub that I believe closed during the pandemic, but it may be possible that will reopen now. The economy is starting to open up again. And the vitality that would be brought and the economic improvement that would be brought by the 17 dwellings would perhaps support more facilities in the site. And this is an emerging allocation. It was not discussed back in April when Section 2 was being discussed, and there were no concerns with it at the time. And with regards to archaeology, this has been reviewed by the council's archaeological consultant, and today again by the council's brand new archaeological officer. So the trial trenching was undertaken in accordance with a working scheme investigation that was approved by Colchester Borough Council. It was overseen by the archaeological officer at Colchester Borough Council, and the archaeological assessment was fully assessed by us. And we are confident that sufficient archaeological work has been undertaken, and that no further archaeological work is necessary. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that the potential harm that this proposal might cause has been raised, and archaeological is one of them. And I think my colleague is right that so long as that's been done properly, then that's something that would add weight to the officer's recommendation. But in terms of judging harm by significance, then also benefit by significance is also pertinent, and I welcome the addition of the 30% affordable housing, and in particular the 3 and 4 bedroom build that may come from this, as they are. Although statistically it may be the lower bedroom need that is more numerous, as someone who's worked in allocation of social housing for a good couple of decades, often finding the 3 and 4 bedroom houses can be significantly difficult. And therefore I welcome it, and especially in a village. I'm not sure of the situation in Fordham, but the actual right to buy has, by consequence, hollowed out some of these rural communities in terms of social housing, where we're several decades on from the right to buy being brought in. There is little and sometimes no social housing. So to have five socially built and rented housing, especially on the 3 and 4 bedroom scale, is something that I think is a significant benefit and needs to be taken into account when weighing up this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Oxford, are you satisfied with Annabelle's answer to your question regarding the footpath, that it could be possibly resolved at the reserved matters?
I wasn't totally convinced by what she said, because I was hoping for more in relation to, I mean, the point I was trying to raise is that when you've got pedestrians so close to the road, you've got pollution, and we know there was a child in London. There's a difference between London and Fordham, I accept, but pollution is pollution in any sense of the matter. And also there's a safety element. So why pull out a hedge that is already there if you don't have to, when you could just put the path on the inside, giving greater protection for pedestrians and obviously away from the traffic. I just think it's a road safety issue, and I'm not convinced that leaving it to reserved matters would get a satisfactory conclusion. That's just me. Others may differ on that.
Councillor McLean, are you happy with the visual display element that was explained?
I'm happy with we'll be guided by highways, as they are the experts, and I do know the road very well, and I do know it does need to be seen, and it's a lovely thought to be able to keep a hedge, but if they're going to be putting the greenery back, and we will have to be guided by the safety issue of the cars and the pavement and all the rest of it, you know, I think we have to be guided by that. But yeah, it is always nice to keep what is, but if you can't, then do it the best way you can to make it acceptable and a nice place for people to live and work and play.
Councillor Lilly, are you happy with the reply regarding the archaeology?
I am, yes.
Councillor Mannion, are you happy with the reply you received?
Reasonably so, Chair. Thank you.
Would any others?
Chair, Annabelle Cooper would like to respond, if you'd like to invite her.
Can you repeat that? Sorry.
Sorry, would you like to go back to Annabelle Cooper? She's indicating to speak.
Thank you. Sorry, Annabelle, would like to respond? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. It's with regards to the matter with the location of the footpath. So that's not something we could resolve at this time, because the only matters to be determined are the principle and the access. But there would be a footpath coming forward, and the location and specifics of this would be resolved at reserved matter stage. But what I would recommend would maybe be an informative, so that we could look at maybe retaining the hedge if that's possible. If not, then like Councillor McLean said, the visibility displays and the highway safety would take precedence. But this is something we could flag up so that we know it's an important matter to resolve at reserved matter stage. Thank you.
Thank you, Annabelle. Are you happy, Councillor Oxford? Are there any other speakers? No? Do we have a proposal to approve this application? Councillor Warnes, and seconded Councillor McLean. Are you happy to go directly now to the vote? So we have a proposal to approve this application with the various conditions that are set out in the report, plus the new one that we add an informative in regard to the footpath. Yes? So all those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, committee. That's unanimous. So we can now move on to 7.4, which is Lucy Mondon. So Lucy, there you are. Thank you. Would you like to set us off, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. This application seeks planning permission for a two-storey community centre on a site in Stanway. As you'll see in the description of development, it's a resubmission of an earlier application, reference 201365, and this was approved in October 2020. So there is already planning permission for a community centre on this site. The revised proposal is very similar to the approved scheme, but a new planning application has been submitted because some of the changes just go beyond what could be dealt with by way of a non-material amendment, hence the fresh application. So on the left-hand side of the slide is the site plan outlined in red, and then there's an accompanying aerial photograph just to show the site in more detail. You might be able to just see the outline of the site, although it's not overly clear on the screen, but due to the darker vegetation. And then you can see the existing Lakelands development to the east and the bypass road running north to south, and then the surrounding country park to the west of the site. This is a bird's eye view, which just better shows the relationship between the application site and the existing properties on the Lakelands development. Again, you can see the outline of the site due to the darker vegetation just coming around here. And this is an alternate view looking directly towards the Lakelands development with the application site in the middle of the frame. This is a photograph taken from the design and access statement. It shows a view directly across the site from the very northern part of the park and pedestrian access going in at that point. So you can see the site annotated there on the photograph. And finally, a photograph looking down, looking west on Jackdaw Drive. And the reason I've shown this photograph is because the community centre would be visible at the very end of this vista, so it would act as a visual stop at this point. And as I'll show you in the layout drawing in a moment, there's a piece of public art or signage that will go in approximately this position. You can see my cursor, just to add a bit more visual interest. So as I mentioned, there is a previous approval on this site, and just for background information, I'll run through the approved scheme for information. This is the layout, and the building is located here in the northern part of the site. You can see this beige colour here, which is all the parking and turning areas. Just this road running here, you can see my cursor moving, is Jackdaw Drive, which is the view that I just showed you a moment ago. These are the floor plans, and it's typical of a community centre with a main hall, which is pink. The ground floor is at on the left-hand side of the slide. Function room, bar, toilet facilities. The dark pink areas are storage rooms. And then on there's a mezzanine floor, which is the middle image you can see, which has a function room, some storerooms, and this lighter pink colour is a gallery that would have a view over the main hall. And these are the elevations, quite a modern building. And then just moving on to the current proposal. So this is the site plan. Again, the building in the same location to the northern part of the site. The parking, which is this lighter sandy coloured area, has been condensed. There's some overflow parking just here. And then there's a lot of annotations on this drawing, which unfortunately you won't be able to read on the slide, but they show a lot of the ecological improvement measures which are down the western side of the site, such as hedgehog houses, bird boxes, bat boxes, bee boxes, etc. Down in the south-eastern corner of the site is a drainage basin. And then the main access to the site is through the existing spur that's just here to the north. The floor plans are much the same as the previous scheme. There's a little bit more storage space down at ground floor because the mezzanine floor has been extended slightly and rearranged. So you might notice that the storage areas on the mezzanine floor have been omitted, and in their place are 2 office rooms, which is the purpley colour that you can see. And in order to have this office space, there's been some additional roof lights added, which you can see on the roof plan, just on the right-hand side of the screen. And these are the elevations. So the design, as you can see, is very similar to the approved scheme. There's the addition of the roof lights, and some of the fenestration has been amended, some of the door positions, but it is largely as approved. So the planning considerations are set out in the committee report, but I would like to turn your attention to the amendment sheet, which does have some further updates. So the first update is just to let members know that the applicant has submitted some further information to seek to address 2 of the pre-commencement conditions that have been recommended. At this stage, the information doesn't adequately address the conditions, so I haven't proposed any changes to the conditions. They remain as per the committee report. The second update is to advise that an additional local representation has been received, which queries why existing Stanway community halls cannot be updated and extended. And a very similar point has been addressed in the committee report, so there's nothing further to add in that regard. And the final update is that members will note that the recommendation in the report was subject to Highway Authority and Highways England comments, both of which have now been received. Highways England have commented that they have no objection to the application, and the Highway Authority have said the same, but subject to conditions. And these conditions have already been incorporated into the main committee report. So the recommendation is to approve, subject to the recommended condition, and also to allow delegated authority to make minor amendments to conditions as necessary in accordance with current regulations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Mr. Gillies, would you like to come and address the committee, please? Thank you.
Chair, ladies and gentlemen, Roger Gillis, Director of Barefoot and Gillis Architects, with the architects for the scheme. We were appointed in December 2019 to design a community facility for the site adjacent to the Stanway Western Bypass, on a site allocated as a country park and adjacent to the wider Lakelands development. We presented a number of ideas for the type of building that would be suitable for a rural setting, and which could accommodate sports and community facilities. We discussed the initial design with the Council's Development Manager and the Community Liaison Officer, both to establish the form of the building and the activities to include which are needed in the area. We produced some initial proposals for their consideration and subsequently held a series of public consultations which gave us a clear idea of the priorities of local people. Whilst we were developing proposals for the building, the Community Liaison Officer had been in discussions with Stanway Parish Council and established that the Parish Council will now lease and operate the community centre. Following the public consultation, therefore, we revised our proposals to take into consideration not only the feedback from public consultations, but also the requirements of Stanway Parish Council. And these, as Lucy has shown, included additional offices, coffee point, and an interview room. In October 2020, we gained planning permission for this scheme and developed the scheme further for tendering the building work. Subsequently, we've had to make a number of changes to the external appearance of the building and revise some of the external works, partly due to cost restrictions and partly due to the need to restrict any noise which may be a nuisance to neighbouring residences. The changes made were not fundamental, but they were sufficiently different to the original proposals to require a further planning application. This is the scheme that has been presented today. The proposals now include a hall which can be used for functions and for sports, a bar and kitchen, offices for the parish council, and smaller function rooms on both the ground and first floor. The building itself occupies a relatively small part of the site, and therefore there will be plenty of room for outside sports activities which can be developed over time. We believe the community centre will serve not only the nearby Lakeland residential area, but also the larger community. And in addition, will serve to promote the use of the adjoining area allocated as a country park. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gillies.
Thank you.
I understand Councillor McLean and perhaps Councillor Lilly might want to comment first on this application. Is that so, Councillor McLean?
Thank you, Chair. I'm delighted to see this at long last coming to committee. It's been long awaited. It's been going on for quite a few years now. We've had to take all the development and nothing to show for it so far. So it's a shame it's had to be restricted on some of the costs. You know, there's been some restrictions, but let's hope what we get will be second to none. I would like to ask about the car spaces with 19. The biggest concern I have is the surrounding area in Jackdaw Drive and the slip road coming off the Western Bypass. There's no room for parking in these roads, only for residents, and it's chock-a-block. So how are we, if we're going to be having functions over there with 19 spaces, how are we going to facilitate people coming to that site? There is no bus stop here. It is a bypass. There's no crossing here. I know there's going to be something put in place, but you cannot have a zebra crossing on this road. So we've got to think how we're going to impinge on all these local residents with maybe people using this area. I think we've got to be sympathetic with them. We've got to help them because there is not a lot of space on those roads. So is there any way we can get some more space for parking? I know it's not ideal, we don't want the parking, especially in a country park, but if you're going to be using it for functions, you're going to get people coming from the wider area by cars, and there is nowhere to park, unless there's something else in the wider plan coming forward, which is going to be able to help facilitate that. So that's my biggest concern, is the parking and the, inconvenience to all the residents.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Councillor Lilly, would you like to comment?
Yes, I'm only commenting that when I was a portfolio holder for communities, this came down my alleyway so much. It's a really good, it is a good asset for Stanway, and as Councillor McLean has said, it's been an awful long time coming, so there's been a lot of consultations up there, and she's right about one of the concerns about putting it there was the fact that there wasn't enough space for people to come into, as we as we all know, they'll drive to the centre for a function. It's maybe there is something down the line. We didn't see it at the time, but that wasn't a good enough reason for us to say that they can't have it really in that location. So it was done with the consultation of the parish council and the ward councillors there. But yeah, I think it'd be a really good asset in the long run, but there will be an issue outside because there was a problem that came up about the speeding vehicles going down there, and I think a Toucan Crossing is talked about for that area. So hopefully the idea is to have toddler classes, parent toddler classes, but if they're going to cross that busy road, that was a major concern. But hopefully, and I say this, and I've said this for the last X amount of years I've been a councillor, hopefully highways will come up with something, but I very much doubt it. But I believe it is a really good community asset for the residents of Stanway and the outside areas there.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Councillor Oxford.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think I ought to declare a non-pecuniary interest, as the gentleman who spoke represents the architects who are also designing our second one in Iwoods. So purely from that aspect, obviously I welcome this community centre in Stanway. As Mike has said, it's been a while coming, and Jackie has said also. My only concern is about the parking, because we've got one existing community centre with 110 parking spaces, and the one that's going to be redeveloped, which is currently the former rugby club building, has 80. So it does seem slightly on the mean side on the number of parking spaces. So I do take into account what Jackie has said in relation to difficulties with parking in surrounding areas, and you don't want that. So perhaps, sorry? Yeah, exactly, and no public transport. So, but the need for a community centre is a vital service, and just like ours, yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oxford. Councillor Warnes, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as Jackie, local member, has said, this is welcomed. It's been some time coming. My concern is that it states that sustainable transport to and from the site should be considered and promoted, but Shanks's Pony is a sustainable form of transport, and I'm just worried that if this is something that we would want to encourage the community to use, then safe access across that road is absolutely essential if there is to be no underpass. So it strikes me that this is something that this council could stringently flag up with the county council, because you have to take into account the Equalities Act here, that there will be people that are not as mobile as the normal person is, and therefore under the Equalities Act mitigations have to take place. So I really think that the great omission here is how we're going to promote walking to and from the site, as it's meant to be a community centre.
Thank you. Lucy, would you like to, oh, sorry, beg your pardon, Councillor Davids.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. Just really emphasising what has already been said about parking or getting to the hall. The problem is that a hall has to be sustainable, and that means financially viable. And certainly, as a trustee of a village hall, I know we have to have 100 or more people turning up to events. There is never enough parking, and here you've got a situation where there is no alternative parking. So I just wonder whether there's any way of having more temporary parking available for larger events, whether there's room for a bus lay-by on the site, because if a bus service was provided. it really is a problem, and there is no alternative. And I just wonder whether the country park even could have some green matting, green surplus car parking put on that as well. But realistically, the other issue I've got, and Councillor Warnes has mentioned it, is that if this is used for a nursery or something like that in the morning, you've got young under fives trying to cross that busy road. And actually it does need a proper crossing, you know, and highways may need contributions towards that. But I know there are some 106 funds available. And I just think that we've got to put the safety of people and children first. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. Councillor McLean.
Thank you. I know there's nothing on here, but is there something else coming onto that site that could actually supply temporary parking? I mean, there was talk of something recently through the grapevine, but I don't know if something could be used, if there's another operative going to be going on the site of some substantial feature. So, I mean, it's just, if there is something we could then maybe share, because they won't need the parking quite the same, then that might be worth looking at. The other thing is, I know we've got the nursery school, the schools on the site. They do have Church Lane Bridge they can go over and walk down if they want to do like the nature trail walk, but that's one heck of a steep drop walking down there. It's not pleasant at all. So I don't know how that would work. And the bridge only, you have to use it as a passing point. You go on the brow of a hill and you have to pass. I mean, it's not the most ideal situation, really. So I don't know if there's any other plans that we could maybe look into.
Thank you, Councillor McLean. Lucy, would you be kind enough to answer all these questions?
Yes, thank you. Yep. So in terms of the parking, let's see if I can bring my screen up again. There we go. And sorry, it's slightly blurred on the larger screen. But in terms of the parking, you have the 19 spaces that are set out here in the main parking area, and that incorporates electric charging spaces and also disabled spaces. And then this slightly darker green area just here, if you can see the red marker, that's some overflow spaces. That's an additional 5 spaces. In terms of the vehicle parking standards SPD, there is a maximum standard for parking spaces, and due to the size of this facility, that maximum standard would be 25 car parking spaces. So along with the overflow spaces, there's 24 spaces being provided, so it's getting close to that maximum. What I could do is go back to the applicant to see whether this overflow area could perhaps be extended by a space or 2, if that would give members some comfort for some further overflow spaces. But as it stands, it's quite close to that maximum standard for parking spaces. There'd also be cycle spaces provided to encourage people to cycle to the facility, and that will include electric cycle spaces as well, which is encouraging for people to charge their electric bikes. And the scheme does have pedestrian access in here, which brings us to the crossing matter. So the Highway Authority condition requires an upgrade of this crossing where my red marker is just there. And then on this plan, there's indicated another crossing here, which is under discussion with Essex County Council. And that's something that's taking place outside of this application. And I have seen some mention of the possibility of a Toucan Crossing, which Councillor Lilly mentioned. I believe they're looking into options of funding and looking at Section 106 funding at the moment. So those discussions are ongoing. I'll leave that back to members to see whether there's any follow-on questions.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments on this? It seems to me we're in between a bit of a rock and a hard place, a very much needed facility, but the infrastructure surrounding it and limited parking is something of a problem. So, councillors, may I have any other comments? Councillor Davidson.
Yes, Lucy, in that last slide that you showed, there was a white area at the bottom of the area, whereas the original permission, I think, was granted on the whole area. I just wondered what options there are for overflow car parking or something else on that white area.
I'll just bring the slide back so we can all see it. Yes, in the previous permission, this area was shaded green for future use, future sports use, and the same applies to it currently. Although on the current application there is a fence line going along here, you can see this square just where my marker is, and that's marked up as a future multi-use games area. So it's still proposed for some of those sporting activities. The overflow parking area is conveniently located at the end of the existing car parking area, which is why I suggested that perhaps if some additional overflow car parking was required, it could possibly go within this area just here, as it's more convenient to be provided in that location.
And Chairman, if I could just ask, are there no crossing points across the main new road?
Yeah, not currently. There's on this plan, it's indicating that a potential area for a crossing is just in this location here, and that's currently undergoing discussions with Essex County Council.
Sorry, I was looking for something across the bypass into the housing estate.
Oh, into the housing estate? No, there's a crossing at this location here.
Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I want to really put more emphasis on what Councillor Davison is saying. That I really do think that the wording in the document, it does not put anything concrete around a crossing. It talks about the consultation still taking place, an upgrade to, traffic islands, a Toucan Crossing is being discussed. And I don't think we must lose sight of the integral need for safe and adequate access across the road, because it is a community centre. And one of the ways you can reduce the demand on parking is to make it safe and easy to be able to walk to the building. And I'm really asking, do we have the powers to really try to underline the need for an adequate and safe crossing in this particular application? And I'm confused as to what the light blue line is that appears to go right across the road on the map. There's no illustration to actually, there's no description to actually say what that is.
Yes, unfortunately you can't see the wording on there, but it just says that it's a view through from the Lakelands development. So it's just indicating a view, which I showed on one of the photographs earlier on. Throughout the course of the application, I did have further discussions with the Highway Authority to look at the Toucan Crossing issue, and it was confirmed that due to the scale of this development, it didn't justify the requirement for this developer to provide the Toucan Crossing off the back of this proposal, which is why the Highway Authority recommendation came through as it did, asking for the upgrade in this location here. Also, this scheme already does have a planning permission that doesn't require that, that crossing. But I would say that due to a planning permission here for a community centre, it does place greater emphasis on the need for a crossing on the bypass to allow that access from the residential areas. And I believe there are discussions about whether there could be an application made to the local highway panel, for example, to seek a crossing in the location.
Yeah, Chair, if I could add by way of information, there's two tools in our toolbox. One is the actual Equality Act, and that needs the needs for instance, age is a protected characteristic. So as Councillor Davison says, you will possibly have toddlers or parents that don't have vehicles wanting to cross the road. You may well have older people, and you may well have people who are living with disabilities that would also want to cross that road. So I do think under the public sector duty, I can't remember the chapter, but Essex County Council will have a duty to consider the actual Equality Act. And the other tool in our toolbox is that no local authority should fetter its discretion. So even though it says it does not meet the criteria, they should have discretion. And the need for an adequate and safe crossing seems to be blindingly obvious to me, and it's something that I'd like us to very much underline and use whatever influence and powers we have to make sure that the Highways Authority properly address it.
Thank you, Councillor Warnes. If the committee were minded to approve this application, of course, it will take some time to actually build and come into use. So perhaps we could use this interim time, should you approve, to actually lobby seriously hard Essex County Council to provide that crossing. Councillor McLean.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Chair, and I think we should lobby them very hard for this. But I think we cannot afford to not put this through. I would like to propose it as is, with an informative that we seriously look into the parking issues and the crossing issues, because we've got all the schooling, all the houses. We've taken, I don't know how many thousands of houses in Stanway with the proviso we were giving them a community centre. So they've done the building, the money's gone, and we're left with, a little bit of a blip. So, I think it's only fair that somebody gets lobbied very hard and we do get what we want regarding the safety of the residents of Stanway.
Do I have a seconder for that? Councillor, thank you. Committee, do we have any other comments, or are you happy to go to the vote? Right, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Thank you, that's unanimous, with the added informative pleas in regard to the crossing and the parking. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have now been going for 2 hours and 20 minutes, and I certainly need a break, so I propose that we have a short break now. We have 4 more items to discuss, so I think that's a little long to actually go through. Would 15 minutes be sufficient? Yes, thank you very much. So if we reconvene here at 25 minutes to 9, thank you very much. Committee, are we ready to begin again? Thank you very much. I lied to you earlier, not deliberately. We have only 3 applications to deliver, not 4. Thank you. Our next item is 7.5, and it is Craffield Road, the demolition of a chalet bungalow and construction of 2 new dwellings. Eleanor, would you be kind enough to start us off, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So as mentioned, we are at 23 Craffield Road, specifically to the north of Craffield Road. The proposal is to demolish the existing chalet bungalow and garage and replace with 2 detached 3-storey dwellings. I hope you can see on the plan there that the hatch denotes the chalet bungalow and garage, and the site plan demonstrates the 2 dwellings there labelled as plot 1 and 2, with 2 car parking spaces to the front of each of those. The proposal includes a new access point, so this would remove 1 on-road car parking space, but this is also to be replaced. That has already been agreed with the North Essex Parking Partnership. Moving on to the next slide, so these are the proposed elevations. On the left-hand side is number 25, which is locally listed, and towards the right is number 21. The whole site is in the conservation area. The proposal is considered to be of attractive design and architectural detailing and reflects the 19th century detail and architecture surrounding it, and actually represents an enhancement of the site and enhances the conservation area. Currently, the site actually is considered to detract from it. So these are the detailed elevations. This is plot 1. And moving on to plot 2. They are both of a sort of gaunt buff brick and Spanish slate construction with timber doors and windows. This represents the surrounding materials in the area. So moving on to some site photos. So this is the existing chalet there that you can see. The proposed new access is going to the rear of that red car. The lamppost that you should be able to see there is also locally listed. However, there is no change to this, and the access doesn't infringe on this lamppost. So we are looking further to the west now, and you can just see the apex of the chalet bungalow there. There are also 2 lime trees which are retained in the scheme, and this has also been included within the unilateral undertaking, so their retention is secured. Looking towards the east of the site, you'll see there the red brick of number 25, which I already mentioned is locally listed. You'll see there's a projecting bay window there that has bay windows at the front and on both sides. The proposal is not considered to cause any harm to those windows. In the background, you'll see number 21 there, which has 3 side-facing windows. You can only see 2 in this photo, but I'll try and demonstrate that a bit better in the next one. Given the proposal is directly to the west, and these are dual aspect, the impact on these is considered to be acceptable as well. So slightly recessed at ground floor level, I've tried to include the window to this property, number 21, but there are 3 in total on the side. So a little bird's eye view for you, so you can see the rear gardens in a bit more detail. It's worth pointing out that at the rear of the site is 13A Hospital Road rear garden. So while there'll be a change to the number of windows which overlook this property and the garden, it is an urban area where there is mutual overlooking to be expected. There's also a number of properties with 2 and 3 floor windows. There is a 3rd-storey window proposed on each property, but these are obscure glazed. And this is another bird's eye view from the rear of the site. You can see the chalet bungalow. There is a little window there in the roof as well. But this shows that there are already existing windows overlooking the rear garden. So it's considered to be an acceptable impact on number 13A Hospital Road. So the final slide, just to go back to the street view elevations, is considered to be acceptable and is recommended for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I understand Tim Oxton is going to join us via Zoom. Would you like to address the committee, Mr. Oxton?
Right, I've unmuted now. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very good. Thank you. Right, okay, I will commence. Well, good evening, councillors. My name is Tim Oxton, as already announced, and I'm addressing you as a local resident living almost directly opposite the site in question. I represent only my wife and myself. We have lived in Craffield Road for almost 40 years, and we wish as far as possible to protect the amenity of our neighbourhood. The house in question, Little Home, 23 Craffield Road, is one of only 2 houses in our road with an intact garden. This is a haven for wildlife and for all who pass by, a welcome contrast to the bleakness of front gardens converted into car parks. In the front garden of number 23 is a magnificent magnolia tree, which when it is in full bloom, as it was last month, gives joy to the whole neighbourhood. The Arboricultural Impact Assessment categorises this tree as C1, meaning that it does not add significantly to the tree-based amenity or character of the surrounding area. This is manifestly untrue of the magnolia, which is in a healthy condition and should be allowed to stand. Number 23 is in itself an unremarkable chalet bungalow. However, it is typical of its period, and more importantly, there are now not many bungalows close to the centre of Cultister. Surviving bungalows close to the town centre should be retained, as these are attractive to elderly folk who seldom use their cars or do not have a car at all, and thus do not add to traffic congestion and pollution, as they would do if they were living more towards the outskirts. The 2 detached houses proposed by the applicant are architecturally equally unremarkable. The difference is that their bulk will reduce the amenity value of the garden around them. Being detached from each other, they have scarcely any space between them and the houses on either side, numbers 21 and 25. When new homes are built, they should provide the highest possible standard of energy efficiency, ideally according to passive house standards. Nothing in the application that I have read suggests that there is any intention to achieve this goal. To conclude, councillors, I invite you to reject this planning application, given that for environmental and social reasons, it is good to preserve bungalows close to the town centre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oxton. Thank you.
I haven't quite finished. I've waited 2 hours and 20 minutes to address you. Give me 10 seconds to finish, please. If, however, you
yes, carry on. 10 seconds.
I'm always finished. If you are minded to approve the application, I invite you to specify that the proposed 2 detached houses should be replaced by a pair of semi-detached houses, allowing more space between them and their neighbours on either side. Please also specify the highest standards of construction to reduce impact on the climate. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Oxton. Thank you.
Thanks.
I'll now throw this open to the committee. Do we have anybody wishing to make a comment? Councillor Davidson.
Just need clarification, please, Eleanor, as to whether the garden space is up to building regs. Is it large enough if you put 2 large houses in there? And also, Mr. Mr. Oxon's idea of one large, or sorry, two semis, would that be more acceptable to the street scene as well?
Yes, thank you very much. So what I will try and do is just share my screen again, if that helps. Right, so I've gone back to the block plan. So in this area, it is characterised by detached dwellings, and this goes down from 6 Oxford Road, which is further to the left of this block plan, as in slightly off it, and down towards number 17. So it is characterised by detached dwellings. This proposal does represent quite a good design scheme, and the proportions are acceptable. There is this concern that a semi-detached scheme would appear slightly out of keeping of this cluster of detached houses, which might not reflect the conservation area as appropriately as the submitted scheme. And in terms of the garden space, yes, the garden spaces are in compliance with our policies, which for 4-bedroom houses is 100 square metres, and this is in compliance and reflects the garden spaces around as well.
Thank you, Councillor Davidson. I have just a couple of questions. One is on the brick. Has it been decided that they will be the Galt bricks rather than one of each, one red and one Galt? And the other thing is the glazing to windows at the rear. Are they bedrooms or bathrooms, and will they be fully obscured or partially?
Thank you. So in terms of the brick, we actually have a planning condition which requires samples of the brick, also the mortar and the joints, to be submitted to us for full clarification, but they are due to be Galt brick. Originally, one of the houses was proposed to be red brick, which reflected number 25, but given number 25 is the only red brick dwelling in this street scene, it's more appropriate for the Galt brick so that it remains the only one in red brick. And in terms of the glazing, there's obscure glazing proposed to the second floor window at the rear, which is a circular window. These serve bathrooms. There could be a condition imposed which requires them to be Pilkington glazed to level 4, which is one of the highest, which is normally the standard we would go for if that would help members in terms of the overlooking.
Thank you. Should the committee be pleased to approve this, I personally believe the Galt brick is the best option, but committee members, would anyone else like to comment, please? Okay, so, sorry.
So I'm rather concerned about this magnolia tree because they are quite special and they do flower very early in the season. Is there any chance at all of protecting that during the building process?
Lucy, can we condition the retention of that tree?
It is proposed to be removed, and as said, it's category C, which is in the lowest. Our tree officer did comment on this application and was not concerned with the removal of this magnolia tree. There is a new tree to be planted, a new species. We could always propose an informative that the new tree is a magnolia to replace, but we do have a landscaping condition so that the landscaping scheme is put forward before construction.
Are you happy with that, Councillor Davis?
Well, I can't help thinking they're going to have diggers and all sorts of things on that site. It's actually quite easy to take the root ball of the magnolia and park it for a month and then put it back again. Anything's possible nowadays.
Are we able to condition that?
It might be tricky to condition that since we already have a landscaping condition, but we could condition a replacement magnolia tree, just because I'm not entirely sure whether it would survive the existing magnolia tree, such a change in circumstance.
Chairman, would you, I hear what you say and you're absolutely right, but there are professional firms that they trade in moving large trees. And my problem is replacing it with a new magnolia. It'll take 30, 40 years to become anything substantial. And as Mr. Oxon's saying, it's actually a significant tree in the street scene. So I think nobody can speak for the tree apart from us. And I just think it's worth the effort if you could save it.
Are you happy to do that, Lucy, or do we need to make a formal request for a condition?
It's Eleanor. I might. That's okay. No, that's okay. The only concern that I have is that it was reviewed by our tree officer, who did not give it consideration for its retention. And I'm not the tree officer, so I think it might be helpful if we could pass to Simon to seek clarification on whether we could appropriately condition the retention and relocation of this magnolia tree, which is proposed to be removed to facilitate the development.
Could we ask Mr. Cairns if he could speak to us now, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I am no qualified arboriculturalist, but I do understand that magnolias do resent root disturbance and do not move particularly well. I think particularly a specimen of this scale, I think it would be a real concern as to whether it would move at all, even with the tree spade, as Councillor Davidson suggests. Certainly some trees do take to being moved, but my understanding is that magnolias resent root disturbance and that it wouldn't be a particularly happy result. So I do think that probably if members wish to see a replacement magnolia, that's absolutely achievable, and it will provide a succession to extend the life of the magnolia. Obviously these things don't live forever, so a replacement tree would enable another 40 or 50 years of new residents to enjoy a less mature magnolia as it reaches its full glory. So I would suggest that if members do feel that they wish to see a magnolia in this location, that we go down the landscaping route rather than seeking to move something which may not actually work in the long term and may actually result in a rather unhappy, long and lingering death for the existing tree. So I would suggest, Chair, we'll use the landscaping condition, if that's okay.
Thank you. Do we have any more comments? Would you like to add to this, Councillor Davidson? Are you happy with Mr. Cairns' answer?
Like Mr. Cairns, I'm not a professional arboriculturalist, but yes, as long as it's replaced by a good-sized magnolia rather than just a 2-year-old one. Thank you.
Yes. So perhaps we could condition that a tree of sufficient size is replaced magnolia. Committee, do we have a proposal to approve this application? Councillor Oxford, do we have a seconder? Oh, sorry, Councillor Barton, thank you very much. So if there are no other comments to be made, would you like to go directly to the vote? Yes. All those in favour?
Eight for, Chair.
Those against? Abstentions? Thank you, committee. We now move on to application 7.8, which is Maybury Walk, and it is a lawful development certificate for existing use. Eleanor, could you go through this again, please?
Yep, I'm just going to share my screen once more. Right, there you go. Thank you very much. So yes, we are at 9 Maybury Walk now. So this application relates to a certificate of lawfulness. So this differs from a planning application in that we just consider the actual merits of it in terms of its compliance with the legislation, rather than material planning considerations such as overdevelopment, amenity, etc. So the application site relates to 9 Maybury Walk. Since it's a change of use, there is no change to the footprint or the actual external elevations. There are 2 parking spaces existing and these remain. And this is the drawings of the elevations, as I said. And there's no change externally to the development. So this is the front of 9 Maybury Walk and this is the rear. And this is Class L, which we are considering the application against. So this allows dwelling houses, C3 use, to be changed to use Class C4, which allows up to 6 residents living together, sharing basic amenities such as a kitchen and bathroom. In terms of this application, the residents are up to 4, so below the threshold of 6, and therefore is considered to be lawful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eleanor. We have Councillor Dave Harris, I understand. Thank you, Councillor Harris, if you would address the committee now.
Chairman, we have a member of the public as well speaking against, so we'd normally take them first.
I do beg your pardon. Yes, we have, apologies, Councillor Harris. We have Daniel Krellin, who is speaking against. Good evening.
Good evening. Right. I'm not 100% sure on the ins and outs of the legal system, but Section 1 of the report states that the certificate of the report states a certificate will protect from enforcement if the property has materially changed without an application. The property has been materially changed from a Section 3 dwelling to a C4 upstairs with an extra tenant downstairs. And this was done before a retrospective HMO permission was applied for after a council visit. Multiple objections were filed and the application was rejected. And if that's the case, does this not fall under development not permitted in Class L of the Town and Country Planning Order? There has been a change in type of application suddenly after the applicant's partner has moved out. And I know what happens if the inhabitants increase if this permission goes through. With regard to the lawful change of use application itself, you will see that actually on Section 3 of the site address, it states that it's 8 Maybury Walk, when in fact that's 9 Maybury Walk. That's a mistake. Surely this invalidates the whole application as it is the incorrect property. The property itself states in Section 17.1, 11 Maybury Walk is to be changed to C4. That is another incorrect statement because I live at number 11. There has been a misconnection of wastewater from the newly installed bathroom downstairs, which has caused issues with drainage in the manhole for my property. Anglian Water are investigating this and remedials are required. Council building inspectors are also investigating the disregard for the rules and bylaws on the property. And who is going to ensure that the building regs have been followed internally to ensure safety to the adjoining of my property? There's been an instance all over the news lately of a gas explosion in a row of terraced houses. I do not want that to happen to my family or my home. The applicant has installed a kitchen upstairs already, and we do not know if it has fire doors, adequate smoke detection, gas protection, an escape route. What was the point in the 14 objections listed on the application for multiple residents of our street and the street behind if you've disregarded all of them? The use of this C3 dwelling has materially changed without permission to essentially running a business from a C4 on a residential street. It's already caused multiple antisocial issues and the police have been called a few times onto the tenants. Finally, I'd also like to say that my GDPR was breached and posted on the objections page. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crellin. And now, please, Councillor Harris, would you like to address the committee?
Good evening, Chair. Good evening, councillors. It's great to be back in the building again, isn't it? We've got to be safe, but at least we're here and we're seeing each other, so it's nice to see you all. The first thing I wanted to say to you, Chair, if I may, is the last thing that Danny, the resident, mentioned first of all, and that last of all, which is the GDPR was breached in this occasion, and I want to make sure that we put steps in place to make sure that doesn't happen again, because his data was put on the website without his, normally it's blanked out, and in this case it wasn't. So we must make steps for that. Now on to my points that I want to make. This call-in, friends, was due to concerns by many residents, not just Danny. He represents the next door neighbour, but there are many. My inbox was full for days in this road. Not just Maybury Walk, but in the Willows themselves, where people were in the bedrooms, windows, using them as a lounge, as an upstairs, and looking out on other people in their gardens. Now, I've got several questions. There's 7 in all. I hope that's okay. The first thing I wanted to say is the certificate for lawfulness, lawful development is retrospective, as you see. My first question is, should this be treated as a fresh application, regardless of the changes that have been made to the property? By assessing it as a fresh application, would not all aspects be taken into consideration properly, such as parking, environmental health, adequacy of size for HMO, including the impact as on surrounding properties, noise, overlooking, etc. And I counted that would be the case. So that's the first question. The second question, there is a mistake on page 150, and that's 17.1, where it mentions 11 Maybury Walk, not number 9. And I've mentioned that to the officer this week, and I mention it here today for your perusal and correction, Madam Chair. Section 3.3 of my question is, can residents have clarification on 8.3 in the report? It says that in that total section, private section housing, that paragraph, does it mean that only 4 people can be acceptable to occupy in that property? If that's the case, as I understand it is, how will checks be made? Who checks them? And what assurances have the council got to make sure, without residents reporting, to make sure that maintains at 4? I'm just mindful of the fact in 10 years' time, if a family of 8 move in, what would happen? So that's the question there. My fourth question really is about the safety of people in the house, has been raised by many neighbours, including Danny, over who checks the building style and quality of that build to make sure those people inhabiting in the house and their neighbours are safe. Who checks those? 5, are the requirements for a property to be HMO, size and square footage, etc., obeyed here or not? And if not, what are we putting those people through? The 6th question in 8.3 again, it states that Cultister Borough Council are in the process of checking for safety and management. Those words are in the document for management standards. Have these been concluded? And the question I put to you as members, should the decision be deferred until these are done? And that's a question for your good officers, you're the planning officers, to think about that. 7, recommendation says up to 4 unrelated people are going to be in there in the approved recommendation. So I just want that guarantee that over 4 will not be allowed. And the question I've had from a couple of residents over the way from the Willows complained about the overlooking. What can be done about overlooking into people's gardens from that, what is usually a bedroom and used very rarely, but from somebody that is their habitable part of the house? What can be done about that? So I'm asking you to listen to our residents, not just Danny who's here tonight representing some, but of course the whole surrounding area, please, if you would. If you can answer some of those, I'll be very grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Councillor Harris. Eleanor, are you able to comment on Councillor Harris's concerns and those of Mr. Krellin, particularly the GDPR breach is rather worrying?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Chair. So the GDPR breach is something we take very seriously, and I can assure you that we will have a look into that. And thank you very much for raising that to us. But yes, I can confirm that we'll take that extremely seriously and rectify what needs to be rectified and feed back to our support team who are indexing comments received and let them know. So I'll just go through some of my notes now. 11 Maybury Walk, as mentioned to you yesterday at Chair's briefing, is a typographical error. I do apologise for that. It should obviously say 9 at Maybury Walk. In terms of drainage, building regulations, fire and safety, antisocial issues, as mentioned before, we can only judge this on Class L. And Class L doesn't provide for those issues to be considered here. It is just whether this could go from a C3 to a C4 or vice versa. So it could go from a dwelling house to up to 6 people without requiring planning permission, or back the other way without requiring planning permission. It's fairly common and happens across the borough without needing express planning permission. The only time it might require it is if it's in an Article 4 direction, which this site is not. Oddly enough, given it doesn't actually require planning permission, there is no actual requirement for them to submit a certificate of lawfulness. It's just helpful for, say, selling a house, for example. Let's see. In terms of overlooking, it's an existing window, not a new one, so I'm afraid there's nothing that can be done on that aspect. I hope I got it all, but if there's anything else, please let me know. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Do we have any comments from members? Would you like to comment? Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, we all have a corporate responsibility as well as a individual ward one. So could I have assurances that being a breach of the GDPR has been recognised, we are or will self-refer ourselves to the data protection commissioner, which is part of the actual legislation. I've listened carefully to what the resident has said and what my ward colleague, Councillor Harris, has said. And I believe there is enough uncertainty here to lead me to conclude that I'm not able to support the granting of a certificate of lawfulness. I understand the officer's point of view that it's not required. Nevertheless, it is being asked. And that once again, we find ourselves in a position that because Class L does not explicitly state issues that would cause many of us concern if building regulations were not being met, if the safety and management of the property was not managed in such a way that it allowed the residents to live in harmony with the actual house of multiple occupation. I understand there are concerns about the number of people that may have or are there, and again, Councillor Harris asked whether it's been checked that there's 4, but picking up the reason why that may not have been done is because it can be up to 6. I believe, as Councillor Harris says, we should listen to the residents. There is concern in this particular location, and there has been management issues and antisocial issues, and this is all being done retrospectively. And because the certificate is asked for, it's not something that I am able to support. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Warren. Any further comments? Councillor Lynn.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we had a situation like this come in with the housing refugees, and they were placed in homes, so they weren't inspected then. But our private sector housing team inspected those premises before they moved in, and they should be responsible for going to this property to make a fire assessment to see if it is actually safe for people to live in. I'm not sure if the private sector housing team have been in touch, or perhaps the councillors could get in contact with them to make an assessment of the house and see exactly what's going on in there. Because if there has been fires there in the place, we can't be putting people into properties that are unsafe and could cause damage. But it should be down to the private sector housing team. They're the responsible team for examining these places.
I do agree, Councillor Lilly. It seems odd to me that permission is granted for disparate people to occupy a house where there are no checks made. It seems as though there's one rule for some and a different rule for others. And again, potentially, without these checks, the majority could be potentially really impinged upon their quality of life and so on for the minority. And I find that difficult to accept. So, I mean, I would be very happy for a deferral to be made because we don't have enough information. As I say, I think it's very odd that a person could just put 4 to 6 disparate people in a property without checks. You'd have to have the checks if students were to be there, refugees, as you've mentioned, to be there. So I'm not comfortable with granting this certificate personally in this case. Do other councillors have further comment?
Chairman, Simon Cairns is indicating he'd like to speak.
Oh, Simon, thank you very much. Sorry, I beg your pardon, Simon. Mr. Cairns.
Thank you very much, Chair. Whilst I'm deeply respectful of the comments and opinions of local people, the test before you this evening is a very naked, factual one. The Secretary of State has granted effectively a blanket planning permission across the nation to allow this change of use to take place. Many of your concerns relate to other areas and other areas of legislation, which we are not charged with considering as part of Part L. As the report states, it is a matter of fact that one can change from a single family dwelling house into an HMO with up to 6 people living in it. That is what the legislation states, and we are simply being asked to confirm that that is factually the case. It is simply an application of a clear piece of legislation, secondary legislation from the Secretary of State. We have no discretion in it. It is a matter of fact. And whilst I do understand this is an unpopular use potentially, it is a use which the government have decided to grant planning permission for, and all we are actually being asked to do is to confirm that it is applicable in this case. As Councillor Lilly referred, private sector housing would have to look at these premises as a separate issue, and the fire service to ensure that the building is safe. That is not our remit this evening, Chair. It is simply to give a legal determination as to the meaning of Part L of the permitted development order. And as you can see, it is very simple in its wording. You can have up to 6 unrelated people living together in a house, and that is a permitted change. We have no grounds to refuse that based on objections to the to the appropriateness of that use in this context, the order is quite clear on the scope of the matters you may take into consideration, Chair.
Thank you very much. Can you confirm whether or not, when this house first went into multiple occupancy, whether there would have been checks made in the first instance, or can any household just decide, I've got 4 bedrooms, I'll bring in 4 to 6 people to live in it?
In planning terms, Chair, that is the case, yes. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other areas of legislation which then swing into play to ensure the safety of occupants. But that is not a planning matter. That's dealt with under other areas of legislation.
So is there anything we can do if this application were to be approved, that we can bring some confidence to the neighbours and to the ward councillors that that the relevant authorities will be able to go in should they be needed?
Certainly, Chair, we can refer the matter to our private sector housing team and also to the fire service to ensure that they are aware, and also to our building control colleagues to ensure that appropriate inspections are made and that the premises are fit for this occupancy and safe for the residents.
Thank you very much. Any more comments? Councillor McLean.
Well, I think there's not a lot we can do with this other than insist that it gets put forward to the authorities that can help the local residents. That is obviously the only situation we are capable of providing tonight. But if it's been flagged up, it's now should be the residents here who can, and Councillor Harris, so that needs to be taken further. And I hope they will, get that assurance from us, saying that here in the meeting, and it's followed up with the fullest authority.
Thank you very much. Members, do we have therefore agreement to approve this application on the grounds that our officers will take a very good look and serious look at this property and what occurs in it? Or is there a reason to refuse? I mean, do we have a proposal for this application?
It will go to permitted. It's permitted. It will be allowed, even if we approve.
Oh, I see.
We're endorsing something that's going to go ahead
so
anyway.
are we being asked to simply note this then?
So the recommendation is to grant the certificate. It is just a formal process.
Okay. So if we grant this certificate, we would like then, with the agreement of the committee, to make sure that our housing officers are fully aware of the concerns of Councillor Harris and of the local residents. Is that possible? Sorry? And also the fire brigade, because that is a relevant reason. Yeah.
Yeah, so I can include on the informative on the decision notice, private sector housing, fire and building regulation colleagues, but I'm aware that private sector housing is already aware of this site as well, so hopefully that reassures members.
Thank you very much.
Chair.
Councillor Harris and Councillor Warnes.
Chair, can I ask, if you're going to approve it, that you take a vote on it, please?
Yes. All those in favour of approving? I'm a little bit confused here, because on the one hand we can't not approve it, and on the other hand it seems to be noted. So are we noting it?
Chairman, I think what you're doing is making a recommendation to approve the recommendation in the report with the added informatives that the planning officer has outlined.
I'll second that, because the safeguards have to be put in place.
Okay, so if you are happy with that, may I have your vote to go with it? All those in favour? All those against?
That's carried, Chair.
Are you against or abstaining, Councillor Warren?
I am voting not to approve a lawful certificate.
And no abstentions? Councillor Harris and Mr Crellin, I hope that gives you some confidence that the council will support you in your efforts to make sure that this house of multiple occupancy does conform and makes life easier for local residents. It looks as though our hands were tied and we've done our best, and hopefully we will be able to ensure that there will be a better outcome than perhaps has been up until now. Thank you very much. Thank you, committee. We now go to 7.9, the last item on our agenda, which is the town hall. And we have Irini Demirakou on
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good evening. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Okay, that's excellent. I'll try to share my screen and bear with me, please. I don't know if you can.
We can see that, Irini.
Is that okay? Okay, thank you. So the application relates to the town hall. It is the proposal was a subject of a formal application that was considered at the meeting of Planning Committee, 5th of March 2020. The application was then deferred and it was eventually withdrawn, but it was resubmitted this year with the same set of proposals. As a brief reminder of the case, the room in question, the former Cork Law Library, is situated to the west of the entrance hall, and here is its plan. The access is from the northern wall. There are 3 internal windows in the walls on the west wall, but the remaining walls are all covered by shelving. The book shelves are primarily made of softwood with hardwood leaping on the shelves and dividers and decorative cornice on top. I'm sorry. The decorative cornice on top. There's also on the southern wall, there's also this plaque here which indicates the past use of the building. The application seeks consent to the removal of the shelving. The idea is to retain the frame with all the decorative molding on top and the plaque, but then remove all the shelves from the frame and then redecorate the room and install a kitchenette in this area. The room currently serves as the meeting room for the Liberal Democrat group, and with this proposed refurbishment, the room would be converted into the members' room, which will be used by all political groups. So the committee, the report you have before you, consider the main material matter of this application, which is the proposal's impact on the special interest of the Grade 1 town hall. According to this assessment, the shelving has some evidential and historical value as a partly original feature of the town hall, but it is a utilitarian feature with its fabric has a low intrinsic value and limited aesthetic qualities. Therefore, it makes a limited contribution to the special interest of the Grade 1 town hall. Having in mind this assessment, as well as the proposed mitigation, which includes the preservation of the frame and the plaque, which provides information on the past use of the room, it is regarded that the impact from the proposal would result to a low level of lesser substantial harm to the special interest of the Grade 1 listed building. The removal of the cells would enable the refurbishment of the room to improve its functionality, increase its potential to accommodate a variety of activities, and make it available to a wider group of users. That would represent a benefit for the town hall, and therefore the proposal is regarded to secure some public benefit that outweighs that limited less than substantial harm from the loss of the cells. Historic England were satisfied with the proposed mitigation, and they did not offer any comments or objections. However, last year, the planning committee, who considered the previous application, were of the view that there was insufficient justification for the proposed works due to a number of concerns for the proposal. The committee had concerns about the size and location of the room, which was not regarded suitable for the proposed use. It was suggested that other locations might be more appropriate, such as the old library, and also councillors recommended that the old law books that were once on the shelves could be returned to the room. When the application was resubmitted this year, the proposals did not change, but the applicant provided information to explain that the concerns of the planning committee were taken into account before the resubmission. The applicant explained that other spaces and rooms within the town hall have been considered, including the old library, but they were already allocated to other functions. The applicant also stressed that the proposed works to the room are in response to the Charter accreditor recommendations that the facilities, including the kitchenette and the meeting place, should become available to the members. Moreover, the applicant pointed out that the proposals were circulated by the portfolio holder to all political parties on April 2021, and there have been no comments or objections to suggest that the conversion of the room is not desirable. Finally, the applicant clarified that the law books that were once stored on the shelves, they have been removed from the building and they are no longer available to be restored to the room. So on the basis of this information, it is regarded that there is demand and sufficient justification for the refurbishment of the room, and therefore the proposals satisfy the requirements of the MPPS paragraph 194 and 196, and it's thus recommended for approval.
Thank you very much, Irene. Sir Bob, would you like to come and address the committee, please? And apologies you've had to wait so long.
Mr. Mayor, Chair, councillors, well, actually, it's a bit of a privilege to be at the first meeting after a 15 months break. I hope the committee will refuse this application, and I'll come on to that in a minute. But first, I must register a protest. That I've been attending council and committee meetings now for 57 years, not just here, but elsewhere. It's the first time I've come to a public meeting where there are no agendas for the public. There are no reports for the public. Now, I don't know whether this is a COVID-19 excuse or whether this is going to be the practice in future, because it's not acceptable. Not everybody has iPads. I don't know what the percentage of iPad take up is in Cultister, but let's just say it's 50% or 75%. Let's go for 2/3. That means 40,000 adults do not have access to the deliberations because they don't have iPads. And we know from the homeschooling that disadvantaged families are the ones who are most affected. So that 40,000 will disproportionately in disadvantaged backgrounds. Now, I like to think I'm reasonably articulate, but I don't have an iPad. I have used a computer, but I've refused to use financial matters on the internet. So this council, if this is going to be the practice in future, is socially excluding thousands of its residents, and that is not acceptable in democratic society. Now, coming on to the planning application, I don't know which Philistine or Philistines was responsible. This is a grade 1 listed building. The exterior and interior are all grade 1 listed. And if this was allowed,
then it means that anybody with a listed building will use this as a precedent. If Colchester Borough Council in its own building, a grade 1 listed building, is going to remove original fittings from the Victorian Edwardian era, then what safeguards are there for other listed buildings? Now, I know that Historic England have given a tick to this, but I don't think the Victorian Society have even been asked. And there's another organisation, Society for the Protection of Ancient Buildings. I would urge the committee, I don't think there's been a valid case made as to why this should be done anyway. But if there was a valid case, I don't think it overrides the grade 1 listed status of this building. It may be a small matter, it's just one room, but is an integral part of this building. And finally, if the committee doesn't refuse it, I think it does set that precedent. But then there's the cost, not a matter for you, but I think the public may well ask, what on earth is going on? They're going to rip out the original fittings for what? Why? So I just hope the planning committee will say no. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Councillor Barton.
Thank you, Chair. My first question is why this is back on the agenda, because last year we unanimously refused this and nothing in the application has changed whatsoever. So that's a bit of a mystery that it's reappeared in its original form. Secondly, as Sir Bob said, it's a grade 1 listed building. And I think as councillors, we have a duty to protect and preserve the building. We are custodians in effect. And the Law Court Library should be restored to its original form, in my opinion. It is part of the history of this building. The law book should be returned to the shelves, and I have it on good authority from the hall keepers last year that the books were kept in the basement, totally unsuitable place to keep them. So it's, again, odd that suddenly now they're not available because they were in the basement. I have it on good authority, and they should be, if they are, should be returned to the shelves. That building could be used. At the moment, we've got people that get married signing the register up the end of a corridor in an awful position. I think it's terrible the way they've done the table at the end of a corridor. They could go into that room, it could have all the books in it, it would have a sense of history, a sense of the building, and that's what I think personally should happen. So I absolutely would like to propose that we refuse this application. No way can I support this. Thank you.
Do we have a seconder for that? Gosh, we have a lot. Councillor Lilly, you will second that application. Do you wish to speak as well?
I do, thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll second the application. I think Sir Bob has got this entirely right on this situation here. To rip out all that shelving and the history and turn it into a members' room for councillors to meet and talk, I think that the public would actually not be very happy about that at all. And it's such a shame. It's such a nice little room. And it's also bizarre that the books aren't in that room. Just think how nice it would look if all the books were restored to those shelves in the original. It's an old library. People, as Councillor Barton was saying there, that people could get married down there. They could sign the forms in the historic building. And that's what it's all about. We shouldn't destroy our heritage. We should enhance it. And if we've got the law book somewhere, I mean, whoever put them in the basement, for goodness sake. And so they should be restored. We should refuse the application, and the books should be restored. An investigation should be launched as to why they were put in a basement, what's happened to them, and why aren't they back on the shelves. So I think we should go down that route, to be honest. So yes, I support the application to refuse the application and restore the law books to the library.
Thank you, Councillor Lilly. Any more comments? Councillor Davidson?
I'd like to support that as well, and I think this is absolute sacrilege. And the fact that the books have yet to be returned or found is even worse. I mean, we're custodians of the heritage of this town. and we can't even look after our own building. But more important than that, they're ripping out these fittings to put new fittings in. And actually, they haven't said why they want new fittings and what's the purpose. It doesn't make the room wider because they're going to put something else there. And I've worked out the size of it, and it actually gives us if all 50 councillors wanted to use it, it gives us 3 foot by 2 foot each. And that's not allowing any tables, any chairs, anything. It's not fit for purpose. So until they find a suitable use for the room, I will not support it.
Councillor Chua, did you want to speak?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Chairman, sorry, and Mr. Mayor. I totally agree with what has been said about the room. I can't see any sense as to why we have to tear up the shelves out there and what's going to happen to the wood that is, good solid wood and replaced with, as what has been said. If the books needs to be returned, the law books, to the library, to the shelves there. And if they need anyone to help to put those books up, I'm willing to climb up those stairs and put them on. Thank you.
Any more comments? Councillor Oxford?
I'd just like to agree with everything everybody said, because this is an absolute nonsense of an application. This is the town hall, for God's sake, and we should never be ripping out anything. I mean, I was really upset when the 2 courtrooms were leased out. I mean, I just thought, we should be using them as the town hall, ourselves. It's a town facility, and we just cannot take out those shelves. And quite rightly, as everybody has said, those books should be reinstated onto those shelves as soon as possible.
Speaking for myself as a person who studied law, it would be an absolute joy to be in that room surrounded by those old books. I agree with Councillor Davidson and everybody else. It's sacrilege to have lost those books. And I sincerely hope too that we can replace them, find them and replace them. Councillor Warnes.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I agree with all what's been said. It says in 7.1 that we must have special regard to the desirability of preserving the building or its setting, and any features of special architectural interest or historic interest which it possesses. This report is presented as if preserving those features considered of architectural value is the only option before us, but as 7.1 says, preserving the setting is also part of it, and this is part of the town's heritage. It was a law library, and if it's at all possible to find those books, to restore them and put them back on the shelves and have a proper heritage asset that the public can see and actually appreciate, then I think that's what we should be doing, and therefore I would support rejecting giving permission. Thank you.
So we have the proposal to refuse this application. You wish to go to the vote? All those...
Chair, could we just confirm the planning reasons, please? Could just confirm the reasons for the refusal.
Well, harm to a listed building for one.
Sorry, I have raised my hand.
We wish the retention of this room as the law library. We ask for the books to be replaced.
I've raised my hand.
Might I suggest Councillor Warnes repeats what he's just said, because it covered every aspect we need for a refusal. The wording that he said a few minutes ago, if I may.
I've raised my hand.
Sorry, there's different noises coming at me from all over. Councillor Warnes.
I've raised my hand.
Sorry, Mr. Cairns, yes, please. Oh, sorry, Irini, I beg your pardon. Would you like to comment and sum up for us, please?
Yes, I would like to offer some clarifications regarding the books, which I understand are a major concern for this application. So this morning I discussed the matter with the applicant and I managed to secure more information on this matter. So they clarified that the legal services, the council's legal services did not want the books longer because they were out of date. Rather than disposing them, they offered, the chief operating officer offered them to the tenant of the old library, the restaurant, Memoirs, who wanted them in order to use them for decoration. But apparently when they moved out, they took the books with them. That's the information I managed to get on the books.
Does that change anybody's opinion? No. So
Sorry, no way did they take the whole library to go in that restaurant. That's ridiculous.
Well, that's the information that I have, but as I say, I have to take that information that was given to me. I cannot.
Those rooms are now
I cannot
back for let,
challenge it, you know.
Isn't that right, Richard? The rooms are now back for let. Therefore, hopefully, those books are still in those rooms and can be recovered.
I understand the rooms I think are being marketed, but I'm not 100% sure.
Actually, I remember when the cafe was there in when the area was converted, that there were a lot of books in there, and if they were the law books, then they ought to be returned because surely they belong to this town hall. But anyway, committee, are we minded to vote against this proposal on the ground? Have we given you the sufficient grounds, Richard?
Harm to a listed building. Sorry, I'm going back. That it's part of the council's heritage. I have a note there.
Chair, if you don't mind, Councillor Warnes can repeat what he said.
Yes, okay, Councillor Warnes, would you repeat that and then Jan can take it down?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, the report 7.1 not only allows us to have regard to the desirability of preserving features of special architectural or historic interest, but it also makes provision for us to protect the setting. And this is a heritage asset, and it should be protected, and if at all possible, the books restored to the library, and this becomes a heritage feature that the public can see and enjoy.
Yes, thank you. Jan, did you get that down?
Chair, sorry to prolong matters, but Mr. Cairns is now indicating.
Thank you, Mr. Cairns.
Thank you, Chair. I was only going to say that we obviously had reasons for refusal on the previous application, and it may be simpler for everyone if we simply repeat those reasons for refusal as the application is the same.
Can we repeat the reasons that we did refuse last time? I don't remember them exactly.
No, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm sorry. Yes, in the previous meeting, the application was deferred. It was not refused.
Oh.
It was deferred for further consideration. So there were no reasons for refusal.
Apologies, Chair.
Yes.
Chairman, could we add inappropriate use or as well? Yeah, because actually they're proposing this as a members' room, which there is not enough room, and it would destroy existing structures.
Can that be added, Jan? Did you get that? Is that okay? Yes.
So what I've got is there is a provision for us to protect the setting. So this is a heritage asset to be protected, and the books should be returned as a heritage feature the public will enjoy. Then I've also got that the room is not an appropriate use as a members' room. Is that enough? Yeah.
I don't know whether it's relevant to add, sorry, I don't know if it's relevant to add that as Sir Bob Russell said, it's a listed building and we have a duty of care to retain its integrity both inside and outside. Thank you. So now, committee, may we go to the vote? All those in favour of refusal, will you raise your hand?
Unanimous, Chair.
Unanimous, thank you.
Chair, we do have one more report. You have item 8.
We have the delegated scheme, the scheme of delegation to be noted, really. I think it's sufficient, is it not, to just note that we all note that we have that scheme of delegation, which no doubt we will read or have read and inwardly digested, yes?
Yeah, Chair, on a point of information, I seem to remember us extending the delegation for a period, and it was to then be reviewed, and I thought June was the reveal date. Can you confirm that?
No, I can't actually. Mr. Clifford will.
Chairman, you may wish to note the last sentence in paragraph 1.1, which says the arrangement, the scheme of delegation, has now been paused and a report will be presented to the committee in June. So there will be a further report coming.
So is that okay? In June we will have the report, the full report. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, members. And that's the end of our meeting. And thank you to everyone who stayed the course on the remote channels. Thank you very much. Good night.